Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. We'll decide what the weather ends up doing today as the show progresses. Walked my daughter to school this morning. It was warm. Then it got cold again, and now it looks like the sun's peeking out from the clouds. Turns out the sun is important here in Utah and everywhere else. So we will help you cast off your seasonal affective disorder and talk a little sports, entertain you, inform you. A lot happened over the weekend.
Isn't our main purpose to try to help people stave off their SAD?
Yes.
Whether it's because of seasonal affective or you're just sad.
You're just sad in general.
That's our main purpose. Now, we talk sports, and hopefully that helps you.
Yes. It's hard to be sad when you're listening to a couple of morons prattle on about sports. Or maybe it makes you more sad. I don't know. Tom Callahan is going to join us ahead of the NHL Draft Lottery, which is tonight on ESPN, 5 o'clock. Utah Hockey Club in that weird hinterland. Too good to really be drafting a game-changing type prospect, most likely. And also not quite a playoff team. It's every owner's nightmare. But you've got a nice pipeline of prospects. You have some draft assets. And we'll talk with Tom Callahan about the way that Utah Hockey Club may deploy those assets.
It's interesting the way the draft lottery works. It's a little different from the NBA.
Nobody ties for the best odds. It's if you're the worst team, you get the highest odds.
And you can only go up as many as 10 spots from where you finish in the standings. So that's the other way it's unique from the NBA. Everybody in the lottery in the NBA has a chance at the number 1 overall pick.
Yes.
NHL, it's only the top 10 that have a chance at the number 1 pick.
So right now, the Utah Hockey Club has like a 4% chance of picking number 4.
Yeah, it's between 3 and 4%.
You got like a 94% chance that you're going to pick 14th. So we're just going to ride with that as the assumption. The San Jose Sharks, who, again, that's a Western Conference team. That's a team that, as you get better, you're ahead of the curve, certainly compared to the Sharks, who for back-to-back years had the worst record in the NHL. They drafted Macklin Celebrini last year, and he was an unbelievable rookie. And that kid is just barely scratching the surface of what his career is going to be. So the Sharks drafting number 1 back-to-back isn't fun for anybody necessarily, but that's the case, or that's most likely the case. Anyway, Tom Callahan at 11:30. Scott Mitchell is going to join us at noon, and we'll catch up on all things football. Utah picked up a commitment from a wide receiver in the transfer portal, much to the relief of anyone who follows Utah recruiting, and probably to the relief of a coaching staff and maybe a quarterback room who is looking at the roster right now and saying, hey, we got to figure some more things out on the edge. Tobias Merriweather, we'll talk more about him, the former Cal and Notre Dame Fighting Irish wide receiver, is one of these guys that we'll talk about it now. He is not a star wide receiver, has not yet been a star wide receiver in college football. I'm not going to get excited about someone until I see production from that person. I made the mistake of getting over the moon, pumped up, excited about Dorian Singer coming to the University of Utah last year because that was a guy with 1,000-yard season under his belt. This is an individual in Tobias Merriweather that you're basically adding on potential. And hopefully, I haven't heard anything back from #sources. Hopefully you're not paying a lot for this in the transfer portal because it's like 26 catches over the course of his career so far. Anyway, we'll get into that more with Scott Mitchell. Shahan Jayaraja is going to join us as well. He had a really interesting little footnote, little piece about, where's Cam Rising? Maybe he's got an answer that we don't have. Cam he's made a couple of appearances in public, just hanging out with his buddies. We have not heard any public comments about what his plans are, and we'll catch up with all of that stuff. I put a poll out last night. I will bump it and refresh it today because these headlines, to me, without getting political, it always makes me chuckle when you see the power players, the politicians, the decision makers on actual real life important things start to get distracted or their eyes wander over to sports. And sometimes, the Supreme Court gets involved because of the obstinance of one side or another on an argument. Every once in a while, you will hear a senator or a congressman or whatever put forth some type of proposition on how to fix an issue that seems to be plaguing Georgia football, right? It's always like people who are super passionate about one thing or another. And you've all probably seen the headline that President Trump may or may not be considering an executive order to try to put the genie back in the bottle on things like the transfer portal and NIL. I'm not asking you what you think of President Trump. I'm not asking what you think of putting the genie back in the bottle. I'm asking you if this issue, name, image, and likeness, transfer portal, is enough of an existential threat to college football and college sports. I keep saying college football because that's the one where it's most prevalent, but is it enough of an issue in college sports, especially revenue-producing college sports, that you want to see politicians get involved, that you want to see policymakers, decision makers, real powerful individuals get involved and try to fix, and I throw up the air quotes if you're watching on the YouTube channel right now, try to fix the system we've got right now in college sports? Are you okay with a president potentially throwing out an executive order, which of course would immediately be challenged in court, or for Congress to step in and say, hey, we're putting a cap on NIL to try and even the playing field, which of course would immediately be challenged in court? It would be a tied-up legal process that benefits only the attorneys representing either sides. Billable hours are undefeated, as we like to say in the business. But is it something that you're like, yeah, this is a big enough deal? And right now, the poll has been up for 12 hours. I just retweeted it at Real OC Sports. 63% of people say yes, NIL and transfer portal issues in college sports are meaningful enough that I want to see Congress or the president step in to try and help. I'm actually somewhat surprised to see that. We're generally a shrink the government kind of a thought pool. At least I believe that to be the case. So give me your 877-353-0700. Give me your thoughts on that. I don't know how much bite is behind all that bluster, but we'll see. At the end of the day, it's a legal battle for the ages one way or another, and that's probably as far as it gets until I don't know that politicians are the right kind of power players that can make these decisions. I think that there are two groups of individuals that can actually fix college football as we know it, college basketball as we know it. If you're worried about the effect the transfer portal is having on other sports, fill in the blank, that sport as we know it right now. I think the groups of individuals that actually have the power and probably the desire to do it are television executives and university presidents, chancellors, the power players in the academic world. Athletic directors are not typically powerful enough. They can't make decisions without the blessing of the university president or without the guidance of the university president. Television executives are the ones really waving the magic wand over all of this because they're the ones signing the checks for the broadcasting rights. If they want something to be different, and why would they when the ratings are so good and the money is so good, then maybe they could fix it. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm saying I'm confessing my ignorance here. I don't know if you're the president of Fox, if you're the chairman of ESPN, if you're getting involved on the Netflix or Amazon front as an executive, I don't know how much it really matters to you, how much it really changes your long-term plans if a super PAC of congressmen start coming to you and just being like, hey, we got to fix this. You're probably just like, shut up. Maybe you write a check to bribe somebody off. I don't know. If Donald Trump knocks on your door and it's just like, hey, president of Fox, we got to fix this, man, because college football is like kind of this American cultural backbone, and it's being ruined right now. I don't think that changes things because you're like, dude, look at my ratings. I am trafficking in the same thing that got you elected, and that's not just Trump, that's everyone. I'm trafficking in popular opinion and popularity, and the ratings and the revenues say that we're doing fine here. We expanded the college football playoff like everyone wanted us to, and guess what? Everyone just talked more about it. And we put out a proposal that maybe the SEC and the Big Ten want to expand it a little bit more. And guess what happened? Everybody started paying more attention. We live in a world where attention is currency, and if you're getting all that attention, I don't know. I mean, go ahead, make your political stink. It's only going to benefit the television networks probably. So I don't think the bell ever gets unrung on name, image, and likeness. I just, there are too many legal avenues. There are too many convoluted ways in which a court or a judge or whatever can say, no. Arch Manning was allowed to make $6 million. You cannot not tell the next Arch Manning that he can only make $1 million. Sorry. This is America, free market economy. You make what you're worth. And what you're worth is what someone's willing to pay. There are boosters, there are people willing to pay. So you can't put any restrictions on it. But Utah State and Utah and BYU can't compete with Texas. And the mom and pop store can't compete with Amazon, and we don't protect them either. It's not going to fix anything to get politicians involved, in my opinion. But my opinion is not the only one that matters, so join the discussion. 877-353-0700 at Real OC Sports on Twitter. How did you vote in that poll, James?
I said no. I think that there are much – I've never been a fan of Congress getting involved and government getting involved in sports any more than they have to. There's obviously things like the state high school athletic associations that are directly the government's directly involved with. So that kind of stuff, fine, you know. But this kind of thing, we can find a different way to do this. And the way to do it, OC, and to your point, it's probably not going to happen without convincing these television networks and these powerful presidents of television networks and streaming services that there is a problem that needs to be solved. But the only way this gets solved, in my opinion, OC, is if we get to a point where it's real professional sports, the players can collectively bargain with the institutions, with the conferences, with all the power brokers that are on the other side of the table. The reason I think that is because of what you articulated. Whatever Congress puts together is going to be challenged by somebody, and the Supreme Court will not uphold it. They will rule in the athlete. At least that's what it looks like right now. It looks like they will rule in the athlete's favor based on the 9-0 decision that said you can't do anything to stop these kids from earning money.
That's right.
So that's the only way that the Supreme Court will be like, okay, that's fine, is if these athletes are able to collectively bargain, which means that they are giving consent to say, hey, yeah, go ahead and cap what I can earn.
Which, by the way, is not a realistic solution. Collective bargaining in Major League Baseball and in the NFL and in the NHL and in every professional sports, and from my limited knowledge of what it's like for, I don't know, like the Screen Actors Guild, for any of these things, right? Any of these unions. Imagine how complicated it is in the NFL and how long and drawn out it can be and how careful the selection process of your representatives and all that kind of stuff is, how meaningful and huge and important those things are. And there are what? There are 1,500 guys in the NFL? Something like that? In college sports. And we're not just talking until there's a line of demarcation, until there is a schism. We're not just talking about Division I Power 4 sports. We're talking about the ability for everybody.
Well, not just one sport either, OC. Like these other leagues, they're dealing with one game.
It's tens of thousands of people. And, yeah, you could probably break it off and say, realistically, Atlantic Coast Conference field hockey, your NIL situation is never going to look the same as ACC football is going to look. That's like a common sense sort of thing. So we are going to decide for this. We're going to collectively bargain on the football and basketball side. And then you guys, if you can find a sponsor to pay you, it's unlimited. Good luck. But there's just not a demand for it. But then you're also banking, if that's the decision you try to make, you're also banking on everyone involved in college athletics to be reasonable and to say, you're right, you know what, we don't bring in any money for the program, so we're not entitled to any of the money that comes into the program. And you think that's going to happen? There's going to be somebody out there who raises their hand from the synchronized swimming team and it's just like, whoa. I'm also a student athlete here. Why should the football players get all of it? I just hired an attorney. So a collective bargaining, there are layers to the onion is not adequate. There are permutations in how you can collectively bargain across conferences, from one power school even to another in the same conference, from division to division. You're talking about so many myriad factors. This is the sky full of stars. This is a galaxy of possibilities that it's going to be almost nigh impossible, dare I say, to get people to weigh in and pull on the same rope. It's hard to do in the NFL. It's hard to do in the NBA. It's hard to do. The NBA is the best example. That's like the smallest numbers-wise league, right?
Yeah.
Even those negotiations can get pretty complicated. So
absolutely, we've had lockouts, we've had strikes in in the NBA over the years, and you're right. Like a lot smaller numbers, you'd think that there'd be a lot higher chance that there wouldn't be anything like that, and there still is. So it would definitely be beyond complicated to figure out a way to have collective bargaining. I just don't, and you make a good point, is to say that it feels even, you say even beyond that, it feels impossible. I don't disagree with that. It just feels like, what other way can you bring order to the chaos that's already happening and make rules against recruiting inducements, against tampering, against all these things that shouldn't be legal and technically is illegal, but you can't enforce it because you cannot unring the bell, like you said, because this is not going away. So it feels like the only way to do it is to try to figure out, as you said, a seemingly impossible collective bargaining situation, unless you have another idea.
What you do,
OC.
the poorly fleshed out idea, is one that we've talked about and is one that I think we're headed for, whether people like it or not. What you're looking at is a decision-making process that's probably going to take between 10 and 20 years, where eventually you just get priced out, just like in the free market economy, just like in the real world. You just get priced out. If you're the mom and pop shop, in this case, it starts with Southern Utah and Weber State and
FCS.
Cal Poly
Yeah.
and Montana State. Probably not. It probably doesn't happen to Montana State and Montana because those are the biggest shows in town, right? So that's probably a bad example. Like North Texas, whatever. You start to to gradually see those schools kind of phase out the ability or the willingness to try to play the arms race, and they're just like, okay, you know what? We're not doing football anymore. We'll still be an NCAA institution. We're Gonzaga now.
Yeah.
We're going to try and lean into basketball. Oh, basketball's too expensive too? All right, we'll try baseball. Oh, baseball's too – and you just kind of like – you just trim the fat. That's a rude way to say it. I don't want them to be the fat. I don't – like you're just paring down the actual institutions that can do it and that are willing to do it. And then the rules, whatever rules you make, it's a voluntary basis. Everyone that jumps in on that side of the pond is just like, yep, we have agreed – that we are willing to live in this chaos. The maelstrom of negotiation and tampering and that messiness, we are just willing to live here. And it's going to be so fascinating to know where Utah comes out. And I'm not talking about in the short term. We know where they are in the short term. In the short term, the University of Utah is dedicated to competing at the highest level of sport. They just made another big investment in basketball. Obviously, gymnastics and the Huntsman Center relocation is going to affect them the same way it does basketball. So there's a dual investment there, a dual purpose investment there. And then in football, of course, you know, you're looking at a team that went out and addressed most of its needs in the transfer portal, and that doesn't happen without funds behind it. So Utah has emphatically answered, yeah, we're going to do what we can and compete. And when the House versus NCAA thing comes down, the payments come down. Mark Harlan's already told us they're going to participate at the maximum level of the almost $21 million. So right now, Utah is like, yeah, we're going to do this. And I think that's always going to be the answer for the Utes. I don't know. Right now, the answer for BYU is an even louder, yes, we will participate in this. I don't know if because of the church's involvement, it will always be.
Yeah. We've been joking about how much they've already been pushing back against that idea, with lip service, but then with their actions.
But when we stop,
donor base they're actually doing it. So
in 20 years, after 3 failed efforts by Congress and 3 failed executive orders by the President of the United States, and everyone finally just has to be, you know what? Like, this is just an insane. It's just like a bidding war. This is just craziness, and there's no collective bargaining because it doesn't work at this level.
It may not. You're right.
Like we're casinos all trying to lure the gambler to our particular slot machine. Like, we are just competing. We are individual entities, university by university, conference by conference, all competing with one another. And there's lots of money to go around. So there's plenty of teams that could actually compete and make it compelling every year. I mean, there's at least 25 every year in college football right now. There's 40 that think they belong there. There's 65 that at least have dreams of it. And that's a big league, man. It's way bigger than any of the professional leagues we've got. So those schools
double our professional leagues.
But when we get to a point where everyone just looks around and says, yeah, we're going to be grimy like they're grimy. We're going to tamper to try to get their best players. We're going to, lean into sports gambling sponsors and whatever other sponsors we can.
Whatever revenue we can get.
To try and finance this. Most schools are just like, yeah, man, money's money wherever it comes from. The BYU is one school that has to be like, I don't know.
Yeah, and BYU probably more than most, if not all, but a lot. You could say that about most of the religious affiliated schools. They're going to be like, they're going to have more of a conscience of, hey, we're not going to.
They should. You would hope they should. So, does TCU, does SMU, does
Baylor,
Notre Dame, does Baylor, do they at some point be like, I don't know. And at what point does a university president or a group of chancellors or whatever just be like, this is yucky and I don't want my Stanford is going to be the first one. Just be like, we are above this. The Ivy League has already kind of like, we don't give a bleep about these sports anymore.
That's the other type of university, the ones that actually care the most about academics. The academic institute, the institutions of higher education that actually care the most about higher education, like the Ivy Leagues, like Stanford, Cal, you would put in there too, maybe. They're going to be they're going to have a similar conscience to these religious schools like BYU, where speculating may have at some point to say, you know what, we've hit our limit as to how grimy we want to get with this.
And look, right now we're in the denial phase of the death of college football, right? Eventually we're going to get to the anger, the bargaining, the resolution. The resolution's going to come when everyone's just like, fine.
Oh, see, as a true millennial, I don't like labels. I like to just say I'm in the figuring it out phase.
Okay, well, sorry, but we're in the denial phase right now, where like, isn't it Wisconsin? Yeah. Wisconsin's coach is self-imposing a 2-game suspension this year because he basically, like every other coach in the land, was tampering with somebody else's players, trying to get him to go into the transfer portal, and he didn't put enough layers between him and the request for that player to go into the transfer portal. So now he's got to self-impose to try to keep the teeth of the NCAA away from him.
I'm an honorable coach, so I will sit out 2 games. Yeah.
Which games are you going to sit out this year, Coach? Well, our 2 easiest games.
The first 2 on the schedule, probably.
It's actually, I think, 3 and 4 for Wisconsin.
First 2 are they're playing against Power 4 schools.
Wait, no, that can't be right. Games 3 and 4 for Wisconsin. I'm going to have to fact check myself because games 3 and 4 are Alabama and Maryland for Wisconsin.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we'll look that up.
I'll look it up. But in any case, right, you're getting these like little slap on the wrist type things going around like, oh, yeah, whoopsies.
Self-imposed.
Tampering. I guess we're doing it like everyone else is. And the optics of that, the pageantry, the false.
The pageantry. It goes right in with the football tradition, the pageantry, the tradition.
Where we're just like, yes, we are an honorable institution. We do not engage in tampering. And that's really an acknowledgement that you didn't use the burner phone. You put it on.
Yeah.
You're like the Secretary of Defense or whatever. It's just like, oh, whoops, I accidentally included someone else in the group chat.
I didn't tweet from my burner account. That was my actual account with my name on it.
Another reason why Kevin Durant will never be involved at Texas because he doesn't know when to deactivate the burners.
Man. Yeah, it's it feels like college football Armageddon every day, though, OC. And it feels like we're long overdue for some kind of solution, but you might be right. Maybe the solution is there's no solution.
The solution is everyone just realizing that it's not a level playing field. It really never was.
Never was.
And it's more so uneven than it ever was. And, like, you're just going to have a situation, and it's from we could put the over-under on 10 years. It's going to take most schools, most universities, most states, most whomever, it's going to take them about 10 years, I think, to finally come to terms with the idea, like, here at the University of Missouri, we really don't have a chance to compete with Texas A&M's money, Alabama's money, Georgia's money. We just don't have what it takes to compete at the level that we think we should. And Missouri was another bad example because they're never going to come to that realization because they're like the goofiest, most backwards. But
every school in the SEC is gonna say we're in it and we can compete.
Vanderbilt might be the only one who's just
good point.
Like, guys, we actually looked at the numbers. It doesn't work for us.
They're too smart for it. They're like Stanford. Yeah.
You pansies. You're scared of us. Vanderbilt's like, no, we just don't want to go bankrupt trying to field a football team because we can't compete with you anyway because our best players just end up going to play for you. Anyway.
I wanted to make sure everyone before we end this first segment, wanted to get it out that I hope the 4th was with everyone yesterday, May the 4th.
May the 4th, Star Wars Day. Yeah,
or happy Cinco de Quattro if you prefer that fake holiday for May the 4th.
You're not going to wish anyone an actual Cinco de Mayo. Happy Cinco de Mayo?
And Cinco de Mayo today, yeah. But we missed our chance to do it before the 4th came, so there you go.
Okay, all right. Les Schwab Tires, show sponsor here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Tires, wheels, accessories for whatever you drive. The pros there get the job done right the very first time. Tell them OC sent you. You're getting the boat trailers out. You're getting the campers out right now. Make sure the tires are good on those bad boys. Les Schwab Tires will hook you up. All right, Tom Callahan joins us next. NHL Draft Lottery tonight, 5 o'clock, ESPN. Who is the Utah Hockey Club eyeing in this year's draft class? And could they potentially try to move up to grab somebody who's going to go a little bit higher? Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
Seconds remaining. Off the stick of Buchnevich. Ehlers fanned on it. Down to 3. Ehlers cross ice. Score! Score! Perfetti, with under 2 seconds remaining, ties it.
Winnipeg Jets scored late to send that game to overtime. 4-3 double overtime victory over the Blues in Game 7. Don't look at the numbers. Watch the game. The Hellebuck numbers on how many goals this man was giving up make no sense that they won the series. That sound courtesy of TNT Sports. Kenny Albert on the call. Jets came back down 3-1 with under 2 minutes left in the third period, and they will face the Dallas Stars in the second round. We are your home of the NHL playoffs here on ESPN 700. Next broadcast, Game 1, Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers, Jack Eichel and the Vegas Golden Knights tomorrow at 7. Tom Callahan, NHL and Utah Hockey Club insider, is kind enough to join us here on the Sean O'Connell Show as the draft lottery comes tonight at 5 on ESPN, right in the middle of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Tom, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing all right. We We talked about this, I think, in our last couple of discussions, but there are a lot of new hockey fans here in Salt Lake City with a more vested interest now that we've got our own team that are probably dipping their toes more in a more committed fashion into the Stanley Cup playoffs. And we've been treated to some incredible games, some incredible series so far. As a more seasoned veteran of watching these Stanley Cup playoffs, is this year's tournament an outlier for you and how good it's been, or is this would you characterize it as pretty typical of how crazy it can get?
What I love about the Stanley Cup playoffs is, unlike almost any other of the four majors postseason, really anyone who gets in can win. And that, I think, is the most exciting thing. I think in the NBA, you kind of figure there's going to be, okay, it's probably going to come down to these four teams, maybe a fifth. Baseball's kind of the same way. And I'm not saying upsets don't happen, because they do. Football, you generally expect one of four teams to kind of make it to the Super Bowl. It's just different in hockey. All 16 teams that get in have a chance. The Blues, I put Winnipeg on upset watch, and they almost were. We were tied in that series as long as we could be tied, even in overtime of the Game 7 before we figured out who was moving on. This kind of stuff happens every year. There is a David that slays a Goliath and, or pushes them to the very brink of elimination. And that's just what makes the NHL playoffs so much fun. It's different, and it's so exciting, and you never, ever know what you're going to get.
I referenced this when we played the highlight, but how did the Jets advance when Hellebuck was having just a really rough series? They had to pull him in a game or two, and he gave up what I think the official number was 3.8 something goals against in all of his series games. How did they advance with that going on? We discuss all the time how when a goaltender gets hot, it's as impactful or more impactful than any other position in all of team sports, and Winnipeg advanced with the opposite happening.
And it's interesting because for the last two seasons, Winnipeg has been the best defensive team in the NHL regular season. They've allowed the fewest goals against for 2 years running. And Hellebuck's a big reason why. But what happened was, in the losses, he lost big. And when you get pulled, it definitely inflates your goals against average, because you are now no longer dividing it by the 60 minutes of effort. Say if you let in 3 goals, now you're dividing it by only 20 minutes. And that does inflate that number quite a bit. Was Hellebuck as bad as everybody was saying? No. Was he below his own standards? Yes. I expected him to be better, and I think a lot of people did, but he was good enough. And Winnipeg, to their credit, found a way to score enough goals to survive. Like I say, their bread and butter had been defense and goaltending, and then they were opportunistic offensively, scored enough goals to beat teams, and sometimes they could blow teams out, but it just wasn't very common. Well, you know what? St. Louis really pushed them. If anybody was watching that game last night, you saw the latest ever in NHL history game-tying goal in a Game 7. A Game 7 has never been tied up later than that to send it to overtime. So you want to talk about nail-biter. That was incredible. And it was a great series. Two teams that were really, really well matched. What's not to love? It was exciting the whole time.
What should we learn as Utah Hockey Club fans about St. Louis's kind of last 6 weeks or so? Because you go back far enough, and we were talking about, you got to get past Vancouver, got to get past Calgary. Those are the teams that are in front of you in the playoff standings. And St. Louis got red hot and ended up being this team that almost advanced to round 2 just by playing good hockey at the right time. So what should we learn from seeing that happen here in 2025?
Well, the Blues are, and we've talked about this before, and even on the show we talk about it, the Blues are a good blueprint for postseason success if you, number one, stay healthy, and number two, have everybody kind of tugging on the rope in the same fashion, and that's what St. Louis got down the stretch. Their goaltender got hot at the right time, and I think Utah has a goaltender who can get hot at the right time. I think St. Louis's defense as a team was probably among the best in the league from four nations forward. And they could be physical with teams. They could intimidate teams, and they could push other teams around. And they did. And then they found that recipe led them to offensive chances, led them to the ability to score goals. And that's what they were able to do down the stretch. And they just really started winning hockey games. Calgary had great goaltending during the regular season until towards the end, Dustin Wolf started to get tired. He started to peel off, and with him, Calgary's fortunes also peeled off. Vancouver was just chaos in the dressing room. I don't know how they stayed afloat as long as they did. That team was torn apart from the inside. So St. Louis really took advantage of that.
Tom Callahan, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking a little playoff hockey right now, and we'll get to the NHL Draft Lottery happening tonight on ESPN. We got a Game 1 happening tonight. Toronto and Florida. Panthers were really impressive, and it was a gentleman's sweep to get past Tampa, the in-state rival. Not tremendously more difficult for the Maple Leafs, I guess, at least on a Games 1 standpoint. They beat Ottawa 4-2, and now Florida the slight favorite in this series. Is that the way that you see it?
Yeah, I mean, Florida being the defending Stanley Cup champions gives them an edge in this, especially because just Toronto's postseason history has not been great. They won a round. They beat Ottawa, who did give them a pretty good run for their money. But let's face it, Ottawa, talent-wise, was not where Toronto is. Toronto has finally at least kind of settled their goaltending question. Anthony Stolarz has really shown up in the playoffs for the Maple Leafs, and good for them. They needed someone to answer that question, and they have for several seasons. I still think the experience of last year and the edge that Florida plays with will kind of be what puts them ahead of Toronto in this series. But for the Leafs, I'm really going to be interested to see how they respond to Florida's game in this series, because that is kind of the rap against the Leafs, is that they don't really have enough pushback. They're not quite strong enough to get past all this. So Toronto can prove a lot of people wrong, a lot of doubters, especially in their own market, by showing up and really giving it to the Florida Panthers. So if they're able to not only make it a competitive series, but perhaps even pull what I'd consider an upset and win it, then we'll all have to look differently at the Leafs. But until they do that, well, we don't look differently at the Leafs, and we expect Florida to win.
Mikko Rantanen, I didn't get to see it. I wasn't watching it. I just got to watch the highlights like probably a lot of people did. Hat trick and 4 points in the third period to help Dallas advance. Is that the best individual period you've seen in playoff hockey?
You know what? It ranks up there. I would really have to scour the memory banks to think if it's the best single period, but think about a hat trick plus assist against your former team. You want to talk about motivation. And, even it was kind of mentioned, I forget who was between the benches, but essentially they said on the way by after maybe Rantanen's second or perhaps his third goal, there was a mention to the Colorado bench of basically, in polite words, take that. So there was motivation. He was fired up, and look, 2 nights in a row, talking about playoff hockey and the craziness it is, 2 nights in a row, first Dallas and then Winnipeg, that we saw a team come back with a crazy effort in the third period, tie it, and then win in overtime. And it just, but Rantanen, yeah, that was something. That is what you're paying that guy all that money for. You want him to do that in the playoffs when you need him most.
If you have not seen the highlights, go find them. Incredible playoff hockey happening, and you should be tuning in to listen here on ESPN 700. Catch it wherever your television finds you. All right, let's look at the draft from this Utah Hockey Club angle. They are too good to be drafting, one of the top prospects in this thing, and they're also not good enough to be in the playoff discussion, so they're in that weird sort of no man's land right now. I think the best draft pick they can get is 4, according to the lottery odds. Most likely they're picking at number 14. At 14, are they going to find anything that can have an immediate impact, if that's where they pick?
So it's the cruise of being competitive, right? I mean, you're in kind of that weird no man's land where you're not competing for the cup yet, but you're too good to jump. Even if you're at number 10, you can jump to number 1, and that's why for folks listening in, the max number of spots you can jump is 10 if your lottery ball wins. So they could go to number 4, but even at 4, it's 50-50 if you're getting somebody who's making an impact this year. At 14. You would have to maybe pick a surprise player who's going to jump in right away. But more often than not, what you're going to find in the middle of the first round is a very, very good hockey player who probably has 2 years of junior hockey, college hockey, maybe some minor league apprenticeship that they're going to need minimum before they're ready to go. Even last year, picking high with Tisha Ginla, I mean, unfortunately for Ginla, the guy hurts his shoulder. There's nothing you can do about that. He missed the rest of the season. That's just bad luck. But middle of the first round, you're definitely getting an impact player, but down the line impact player. You're not getting someone who is going to jump in next year and make a huge splash unless somehow that player just comes into camp and absolutely wows you and was holding back in their draft year. But I just don't think you're going to find that.
Is there a player in this draft that if you have the right assets as a team, you might want to move up to try to get?
Boy, that's a tough question for Utah Hockey Club this year as opposed to last year. Last year, I thought because the cupboards were so bare going in that was a real possibility if that right player existed. But honestly, for this year's draft for Utah, they don't have much room on defense, and they've got some prospects in the pipeline who will probably fill that hole. They're set on goaltending, and honestly, their top 6 is pretty well set as well. So the only positions I think it's worth moving up for are a generational defenseman, someone who's going to step in and be your number 1 within a couple of years, or someone who's going to be potentially your leading scorer within the first couple of years. Other than that, honestly, and I think Utah's well positioned, and this is kind of a nice luxury they have, they don't have to move up. They're going to be able to pick the best possible player according to their scouting at number 14, and that means that player has, in my opinion, the best real chance of developing into an everyday NHL player.
Before I let you go, the San Jose Sharks are, I think, a really good informative sort of storyline for Jazz fans right now because they were the worst team in the NHL 2 seasons ago. They got the guy, Macklin Celebrini. He played great as a rookie, and still here they are again in that number 1 draft spot, or at least that's what's most likely to happen when the lottery happens tonight on ESPN. So maybe they get, 2 number 1s in a row. How far away does that still leave you if you're San Jose, who, again, got really nice play out of Macklin Celebrini this year, but they're the worst team in the NHL again? 2 number 1s in a row. How many do you need before they're like back in the position right now that Utah Hockey Club finds themselves in? Competitive, not yet winning playoff series.
Assuming they don't miss on this year's pick, you're probably looking at 2 more years. The thing I like about San Jose, they absolutely stole one of the best goaltending prospects in the league from the Nashville Predators when they got Askarov out of Nashville because of the contract UC Saros signed there. So they stole him. That was a horrible trade for Nashville. But so the Sharks have their goalie of the future, which is important. It's like having your quarterback in the NFL. So they have their goalie. They have a good young forward core. And a lot of their veterans have finally aged out, right? A lot of these teams we look at in other sports or even in the NHL, we're waiting for them to age out, and they're taking too long to age out, and now they're figuring out they're aging out, like the Penguins and the Bruins. The San Jose Sharks gave up on that a while ago to their benefit. So they just, started rebuilding it. If they don't miss on this year's pick, Celebrini can be a game changer, and I think will be, provided he stays healthy. Another number 1 pick, which I expect is probably going to be offense. The Sharks are going to start scaring some teams in probably 2 seasons, and maybe 3-4 years down the road, that is a team that should be in the playoffs.
All right. Was the Mammoth leak on purpose or an actual accident?
Oh my goodness, I love this question because was it right? Was it a PR stunt to draw attention to themselves, or was it an oops essentially? So here's what I think. I've thought about this long and hard, and as someone who has managed several YouTube channels over the years for various entities, teams, and businesses, I would not rename a YouTube channel with all of my assets already on it unless that was going to be my new handle. Because otherwise you have to transfer all of your content, which is a giant pain in the butt. So I think it was an oops. I don't think it was a PR stunt. They can position it that way now, but I think it was an oops because you would not put that on your legit YouTube channel as a place. You would get a placeholder channel. But if you get the placeholder channel with the Mammoth name on it, you can't transfer it to the current channel because that other channel already exists. So I think somebody screwed up. I think it's Mammoth.
I think it's Mammoth too, and I'm really pumped about it. I just want the logo to be as cool as the name. And
it's going to be a Yeti logo, right?
Well, if you put a Yeti on a Mammoth's back, I'm still in support.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing.
I was my daughter's birthday's tomorrow, so we were in the toy section the other day, and there's like this, I don't know, this brand of toys that makes these like fantastical creatures, right? And there was one, it was an ice mammoth, Tom, and her eyes lit up, and she's like, "Dad!" And it's even the same colors. It's like black and white. And this kind of like bluish, icy blue, tealish kind of a situation. She grabs this thing and she's like, "Dad, ice mammoth." I'm like, it's a sign. It's going to be the mammoth.
See, even your daughter knows. I mean, that's it. I really do think that. And I can't wait. No matter what it's going to be, people are going to eat it up. They're going to love it. A couple of people are going to hate on it just to hate it. But you know what? At this point, I think we're going to see it before the draft. I think we kind of have to now, and I can't wait.
Well, fingers crossed. Tom, always appreciate your time and your insight. Enjoy the lottery tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Tom Callahan. Great stuff, as always. And I know it probably starts to feel a little preachy and like a public service announcement, but for real, if you're just a sports fan and hockey is not your main bag right now, you got to catch at least some of these insane force overtime goals like Mikko Rantanen, who I asked Tom about. 3 goals and an assist in the third period to help Dallas advance. If he doesn't score those 3, they don't advance. It's like real do-or-die stuff, and you see these heroes coming up and rising to the occasion, and it's really, really cool to see.
The second goal is one of the most incredible, and I'm not saying I've seen a lot of goals when I say this, but one of the most incredible goals you'll ever see. Certainly one that I've seen where he reaches around. Yes. He reaches around the back of the net and somehow hits it off the defender's skate into the net. Like it was incredible. It made the arena was electric in Dallas after that, and it got even more electric after he assisted and they took the lead, and then he gets the hat trick on the empty netter. It was incredible.
I get goosies, little goose flesh, when I think about playoff hockey happening at the Delta Center and those moments coming to fruition. It's going to go nuts in that place. Anyway, big thanks to Tom Callahan. Hot Lunch is next. A look at the transfer portal in college football, not like the big picture stuff, but actual names. BYU's got a couple of guys. Utah just grabbed a wide receiver. We'll discuss on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We got the Festival of Tees powered by the Utah Golf Association and Mountain America Credit Union. Giving away free golf on Down and Dirty with Scott Mitchell, who's actually going to join me here in about 6 minutes. The Sean O'Connell Show right here. And on the drive with Spence Checketts, 2 to 6. Listen all day for your chance to win. 18 holes at Stonebridge. We'll be giving them away at about 1:45 in topical trivia. So if you want to go golf 18 at Stonebridge, make sure you're tuned in just under 2 hours. Real quick little update on transfer portal players here in the Hot Lunch. Tobias Merriweather has signed with the University of Utah. Former Cal Bear, former Notre Dame Fighting Irish. He has a handful of receptions and a few hundred yards so far. He's got a couple years of eligibility left. Good measurables, tall, 6'5". I'm not getting excited about it because you had one of these guys last year. His name was Damian Alford. Nothing happened.
Yeah, he's going to the CFL probably.
That was more of a quarterbacking issue than it was a Damian Alford problem, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah, the unfortunate thing for Damian, the only stat he really had was an interception, because in that terrible play in the BYU game. But that, again, not really. You can't really blame him too much for that because he's not a quarterback.
He's not a quarterback, and he hadn't been on the field enough to even feel comfortable. Right? If you're going to ask a wide receiver to like fake a reverse and throw a touchdown pass, that should be a guy that you put on the field all the time.
Yeah,
it should be a guy that's like always part of the game plan, isn't competing for his job every single second. You know what I mean? Like, let Britton Covey do that. Sure. High school quarterback, a guy that the opposing defense has no idea what he's going to do at any given time. Like, go ahead. That guy's confidence is unshakable. You put a wide receiver in and just be like, hey, here's what we're going to do. I know you really just want to run downfield with that incredible speed and catch a jump ball. Wrong, buddy. You're going to huck it up there and probably get it intercepted.
You're going to throw a jump ball. How about that?
And it's going to destroy your confidence in everything else you do.
In the biggest game of the year, by the way.
And, by the way, we're going to get really mad at you and scream in your face when it happens.
It just sucks for Damian that's really the only stat on his record
So
in 1 year with
terrible.
Utah. But anyway, we digress. Tobias Merriweather, second receiver that got out of the transfer portal. Neither one of the guys huge numbers. Neither one of the guys from great, football schools necessarily. So hard to get too excited about it, but at least they're adding people.
Last year, Tobias had 11 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown. Now, look, I'm not trying to walk you back and take away any excitement you have about this. Maybe you're somebody out there. They loved him when he was a high school recruit. All right, Utah wanted to get him at that moment. This is why these relationships are still important. He's not emerged yet as a star. Doesn't mean that he can't. Doesn't mean that he won't. But just like I told you, hey, don't overreact when you lose a receiver who had 10 catches for 100 yards, right? Zach Williams, that was his stat line last year. He was a guy who had a few moments, right? I told you, don't freak out because he's gone. I'm going to tell you the same thing. Don't freak out because you got a guy with that level of statistical production.
We got to see it first.
You have to see it. It's every wide receiver from now until the end of time at the University of Utah. Show me, and then I'll get excited about you. That's just how it is.
And we'll definitely report. I'm sure there'll be nice things said about Tobias, and I forget the other receiver they got from Southern Miss. They bring I'm sure there'll be nice things about these two guys that they brought in, said about them in fall camp, and we will report that, and we will take that for what their word. But you got to show us.
I'm telling you something nice right now. Okay, I like this kid as a player. He's tall. He's got some length. He's got some ability. I'm just not going to sell you a bill of goods and get you overly excited about something that I'm not overly excited about. All right, Tobias Merriweather. 11 catches, 125 yards, and a touchdown last year. In 2023, 14 catches, 284. That's a really great average. That's a 20-yard average, a couple of touchdowns as well. Like, awesome. All right. But I'm also not going to freak out when you get a 3-star wide receiver out of high school or a 3-star linebacker for that case. Like, it just, we'll see. I hope. I'm optimistic. But that's it.
At the very least, it's good to see that they have been able to address that need
Yes.
in the transfer portal so far, because it was feeling dire in that receiver room after Zach Williams left.
It was only feeling dire if you thought Zach Williams was
That's
the second.
good point.
I tried to tell
But
people.
just by the numbers standpoint, the lack of depth in there, it's nice to see, okay, well, they were able to get 2 guys in this transfer portal cycle. Let's see if they're able to get more between now and the start of the season.
Oddly enough, the fact that you don't have a lot of returning production for the Utah offense, I've said this before, I'll say it again. It's a good thing. Because what you had last year was the most anemic offense Utah's had in 2 decades. If you were bringing back the playmakers in that offense who were responsible for not really making a ton of big plays, I'd be like, oh, yay. Look at this. You have the same room. Mekhi Bernard, would be nice to have him another year. He was a great playmaker. He was your only really big-time offensive threat, right? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? If you brought back everybody, and I know some people you wanted to bring back, and it was not all by choice, and I know that the lack of production was a lot of that was injury-related, but if I told you, hey, last year's offense, which was really bad, we're bringing everybody back, you'd be like, what? No. No. I don't want that. So it's okay that there's a bunch of question marks, and it's okay that you have to bank on the potential of a Tobias Merriweather, of a Wayshawn Parker, of a Dadron Zipperer, who the natural progression of college football is he's going to climb up the ladder a little bit as you age in a program. All that's okay. Like, I feel like I'm too hard on Landon King, and people feel like, but if there were people who were just excited about the idea of Landon King being the number 1 playmaker in this offense this year, and I was looking at it and being like, what? Why are you so excited about that? You don't want the same everything from a bad year. It's great that you have the same offensive line because that's a strength. If you had the same quarterback from last year or the same quarterbacks that actually got real time last year, people would be bothered. In fact, you had an option to have the same quarterback in Cam Rising, and everyone was ready to move on.
Or to just say, okay, Isaac, this is your team.
Yep, Isaac, guess what? You had a bad year, but we think that's because of your youth. Imagine the reaction if that's what you were bringing back. So when you're not bringing back all of the same stuff and you have to lean into the transfer portal a little bit, like, let's just not panic about it. Don't freak out about Zach Williams leaving. Don't freak out about Merriweather coming. Don't freak out about anything until you see it on a college football Saturday in the fall. Scott Mitchell is going to join us next. We'll see if he feels the same. Hour number 2 begins in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Welcome to hour number 2 of the Sean O'Connell Show. Utah's number one sports talk, ESPN 700. I told you about Tobias Merriweather coming to the University of Utah. We're trying to get Scott Mitchell on the phone here, talk about everything going on with college football, the executive order being floated around. CBS Sports reporting that President Trump is considering throwing out an executive order to try and address the name, image, and likeness craziness in college football. Tommy Tuberville has talked to Trump about it. And Nick Saban, by the way, talk about an influential individual. Nick Saban goes to meet with Donald Trump and have a little conversation. And then the next thing you know, there's a report out there that the president is like, yeah, Saban told me I needed to do an executive order to fix college football. Nick Saban hasn't been a fan of it. I think it did move him closer to retirement. I wish we could inject some truth serum into Nick Saban's veins and ask him if he doesn't like NIL because it threatens the dominance of Alabama, or if he doesn't like NIL because he actually doesn't like NIL and all the other things. You know, he got real bothered on the game day set when people were making jokes about everyone being able to pay players, not just the University of Alabama. He took it personally because, you know, that was his program and he feels like he's a man of integrity. All right. If you want to tell me that nobody at Alabama got paid during your tenure, Nick Saban, all right. Anyway. We didn't discuss this last week. I want to discuss it. I told you actually in the last segment I was going to give you an update on players coming in and going out. We only got to the Utah one. BYU grabbed a couple of Bachmeyers, Hank Bachmeyer's brothers, Tiger and Bear Bachmeyer, have transferred to BYU.
Highly lauded pickup by them over the weekend.
By the way, I want to meet their dad. I want to meet their mom. What are you naming your kids? Hank, Tiger, and Bear.
Those are their actual legal names. Those are not nicknames that have become what they're known as.
I think they're legal names.
Wow. Because that happens in sports, as you know.
Hank might be Henry. Who knows?
Yeah, we call like Tiger Woods is Eldrick, but Tiger became his legal name in sports, right? Because that Magic Johnson. Do you think
he files his taxes under Tiger?
Yeah. Domantas Sabonis, the Kings center. I've mentioned Starting Five on Netflix. He has a son named Tiger as well. Tiger Sabonis.
It's a cool name.
Yeah. It was a cool name before Tiger Woods. It really was. Yeah.
Like, you know what's wild? So, you know the name Shaq?
Yeah.
The name Shaq basically did not exist until Shaquille O'Neal.
Well, you know what's a weird one? Jalen Rose claims he's the first ever Jalen, which sounds ridiculous.
Can't be. No, that's not true.
No, it sounds completely ridiculous. But Pablo Torre, back when he was with ESPN, he's now with Metal Arc Media. He did a ESPN Daily episode, that daily podcast that I think they still do with other people, on trying to verify if Jalen Rose's claim is true. He only found one other Jalen born, and he was born the same year as Jalen Rose.
Wow.
So anyway, that's when it's like Jalen's not that uncommon. Like, it's not like Shaquille, but Jalen Rose apparently is one of the pioneers of the name Jalen, at least as far as researchers at ESPN were able to figure out.
So the Bachmeyer family has April and Michael Bachmeyer are the parents.
Pretty standard names there.
Hank,
names.
Hank, Ella, Bear, and Bucky are the Bachmeyers.
Bucky too. Love that.
This Tiger Bachmeyer sounds like a pretty interesting guy. He and Bear started an a cappella club together.
Oh.
You're telling me that these two big time high school football recruits also have the voice of angels? I love that. Enjoys playing guitar. This is his Stanford player profile.
Okay.
Enjoys playing guitar, harmonica, piano, drawing, modeling, acting, flying airplanes, singing, riding horses and breakdancing, acted in a Super Bowl commercial.
Oh, I missed that.
Tiger Bachmeier is the most interesting man in college football.
Seriously. Is there a cappella group, Nature is Calling? Something like that? It's got to be with names like Tiger and Bear, right? It's got to have some nature pun.
We are getting him on the show, and we are going to ask him what the name of the a cappella group is. Yeah, I love it. Bear Bachmeier, Tiger Bachmeier transferring to BYU. to BYU.
Bear's the quarterback, right? Or
yes, dual threat quarterback, Bear Bachmeier.
I was hearing a ton of buzz about him when BYU came in. I've seen a bunch of that on the timeline. So they're certainly excited about that in Provo.
I mean, look, you need your quarterback of the future, I suppose. Bear Bachmeier had some big-time production. Again, this is why the relationships that you have when you're recruiting guys in high school, you got to maintain those relationships, or at least keep them like cordial when guys decide to go somewhere else, especially a place like Stanford.
Can't let them forget about you.
A place like Stanford. I mean, if you are recruiting against Stanford, you're probably just like, dude, in your heart of hearts, as a grown adult, you're probably just like, yeah, dude, I get it. Stanford. You get a degree from there. Things in your life are going to be hopefully pretty cool. Now, Bear Bachmeier did not graduate from Stanford. A lot of guys like that have transferred to the University of Utah, that have transferred to BYU in the past, they go there, they get the degree, and then they transfer.
Come as a grad transfer.
Yeah. Bear Bachmeier is leaving because his coach is fired.
Yeah.
Like another totally normal thing to be doing. Also, we'll see. Bear Bachmeier wears number 47. You can't wear number 47 playing quarterback at BYU. They're not going to let that happen. So maybe he'll be a safety instead, or a linebacker.
It did make me think all this comfort zone that Utah football and the fan base has had about, okay, we will always have better players than BYU because of the decade plus that they were Power 5 team and BYU was not. It did make me feel like it's almost officially coming to an end, right? Like the coaching has caught up with BYU, at least what we saw last year, and they did it with a kind of an under-talented team by Power 4 standards that overachieved. And credit to them for that, but it feels like with this kind of transfer portal addition, and again, we got to see it on the field first before we get too far ahead of things. But it made me feel like, oh, the talent gap is closing between these two schools.
Well, I mean,
if it hasn't already,
it's hard to say that there's a talent gap when they beat you the last two games.
Definitely true.
Now, there are other metrics for the talent gap, like NFL production. That's probably the high bar. That's the litmus test at the top end of what we consider to be like the real test. And BYU is still not where Utah's now. Both had bad years in terms of producing NFL talent, but BYU still hasn't caught up in that respect. You look at active rosters. Utah's outpacing BYU at that level. You look at the guys acquired either as draft picks or free agents this year. BYU's not keeping up in that regard. But when you talk about the more relevant and the more salient, like who's going to win football games moving forward now that you're back in the same conference together, it's the breadth of the whole thing, right? It's not like who's got the best individual player. Like even when BYU had Kingsley, right? Utah had more NFL talent. Kingsley was arguably the best of the NFL talents in the state, and I think his career is still going to work out. He's going to be, I think, a really good guard, not tackle, for the Kansas City Chiefs.
You get a chance to be a starter for them this year, right?
And I think that situation is a good example of, like, just because you have the best individual talent or the best couple individual talents, like, I mean, the two teams are going to play this year, And if all the projections are correct, and Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomore are both first-round picks or even draft picks at all along the offensive line, that should translate into really good things for Utah, but it doesn't mean you're actually going to win the game if you don't have the right receivers, you don't have the right quarterback, you don't have the right running back, and of course that's what they went out and they did. They tried to get those guys. Now, again, the Bachmeyers, like Tiger Bachmeyer has been productive at Stanford. And playing at Stanford, by the way, not like super stellar Andrew Luck level Stanford quarterbacks. Not even like a Kevin Hogan Stanford quarterback. He still was able to have some really good production. That's an asset for BYU. And the idea that you pulled those guys as a pair is awesome. Now, we don't know if Utah was in the market for either of them. But it kind of stands to reason that if Tiger Bachmeyer was looking for greener pastures, or at least an alternative as a wide receiver who's caught a few balls, you should have been talking to him. And if this means that BYU got him and you didn't, what does that say?
Well, and the fact that he committed to Stanford because of Troy Taylor, he's leaving Stanford because Troy Taylor is no longer there. That guy was Utah's offensive coordinator, and I don't know what kind of bridges are still intact between Troy Taylor and the University of Utah after he was dismissed. But you would think that that would work in Utah's favor a little bit, because I don't know. Utah's been through so many offensive coordinators. Witt is still on pretty good terms with all of them, right? So you'd think that that might have worked in Utah's favor if they were going after these guys. Winds up in Provo, though.
At the end of the day, neither of these guys in 2025 are world-beating, game-changing anythings. The same way, like I'm gonna say it for BYU, certainly the same way I said it for Utah. If a guy has less than, I would probably put it at like 400 yards as a wide receiver. If a guy has less than 20 catches and less than 400 yards and less than 3 touchdowns, I don't think he's even a penciled-in starter. And that's not to disparage anybody. That's a lot more production than I had as a college player, but it's still not anything that gets you excited. And again, even when you think there's a guy to get excited about, like a Dorian Singer, you have to look at the whole picture and what's going to happen with quarterback play and all that stuff. So if you're doing a victory lap right now at BYU versatility, even if he doesn't end up being a quarterback for you, at 6'2", 225 pounds, maybe he ends up being a linebacker or a safety or anything else. And he had some really big-time offers. So, like, go ahead, bring him into the program and see what happens. You don't need a quarterback right now. So, bringing in Tiger, cool. He had a few catches for Stanford. I think he had 10 catches last year. He had a few catches for Stanford. Great. The more important thing is you got his brother. Again, if you're Utah, was this a pair that you wanted to bring into your program? Or were you looking at it and saying, like, hey, because there's a cost-benefit analysis to all of this now. We need somebody who can help us win right now. Is Tiger Bachmeyer that guy? I don't know. If you're choosing between him and the Merriweather kid that you did get to come, you're probably choosing the other kid. But does Tiger Bachmeyer and his association with Bear make him the more appealing prospect? Well, maybe 2 years down the line, but not right now. Kyle Whittingham is not thinking about 2 years down the line. Kyle Whittingham doesn't have 2 years down the line. This is the last year probably for Coach Witt. So, I mean, you bring up a food for thought type of point for me, James, like, hey, is BYU catching up? Yeah, but I don't know if this acquisition is the great evidence of that. Another thing we didn't talk about, because I was traveling and we didn't get to it, we didn't have time. BYU lost Harrison Taggart in the transfer portal.
They did.
He's off to Cal. Now this tells you that Cal is going to over-index on linebacker talent because Rivera is their GM, and that he was a great Cal linebacker. I probably like Harrison Taggart more as a player than most people do. Now, you're still fine. Jack Kelly, great linebacker. Isaiah Glasker, great linebacker. You've got some depth. You got some big body thumpers And so maybe Taggart and his tweener kind of a situation, I imagine the conversation was pretty real. Like, hey, yeah, we want you to play a lot for us this year, but we got two linebackers that are better than you.
Yeah, you're probably not going to start.
He's not their number one linebacker. And so opposing offenses package-wise, like BYU, Jay Hill is running a defense very similar to the Kyle Whittingham, Morgan Scalley defense at the University of Utah, right? Jay Hill is going to have two linebackers on the field a lot this year. And if Harrison Taggart is linebacker number 3, then okay. But that's a big piece. That's like if we came on the air and I was just like, guys, Jonnu Hall's leaving the University of Utah, people would be bothered. There'd be some panic.
That's a good comparison for Utah.
That is the comparison.
That sounds,
It's like
talented, but
I think,
not quite the number 1, maybe not the number 2 guy.
So it's their linebacking cores were very, very similar with those top 3, right? So you had a very experienced and like just super high caliber, cerebral type linebacker with athleticism as well, Levani Damuni. Okay? That's Utah. BYU's got that exact thing in Jack Kelly. All right? You have a guy who's got less production so far, doesn't have the same number of like accolades or tackles or whatever you want to call it, but probably has a higher upside. That's Lander Barton, and that's Isaiah Glasker. Those two are the longer, rangier, scarier, physical, like, oh my gosh, right? And then that third guy, a converted defensive back who's a hell of a linebacker, can run with anybody, doesn't have the same kind of matchup problems running with running backs or with the Brant Keithy type tight end weapons that maybe those other guys have. That's your third option. That was Harrison Taggart. Harrison Taggart is like track speed, right? And Jonnu Hall, as a converted defensive back, is the smaller and faster version. So smaller, faster version of a linebacker. So if I told you that Jonnu Hall was transferring to Cal, people would be up in arms and bothered at the University of Utah. At BYU, because they had a great year last year, everyone's just kind of shrugging it off. That's not the correct reaction in my mind.
Not a starter. It's whatever. We'll be fine. Yeah.
I mean,
They
have depth. They have some talent. His name's escaping me. I have to look it up. There's a Polynesian kid who had a few reps for them last year who's a really good player, and I think he's still there. So I'll look it up. But I think that I didn't see a lot of like bothersome reactions from BYU fans because there's just an assumption now, oh, we're going to be fine. We were good last year. We're going to be good again. Harrison Taggart's a good player. You remember where he went out of high school, right? Oregon.
Yeah.
Oregon gets the best kids from the west of the Mississippi every year, and they wanted Taggart. So, anyway. Big loss, I think, for that program. Got to take a break here. I'm proud to say we have evidence right now that the Jazz and the Rockets were listening to our show last week. Yeah, the Utah Jazz and the Houston Rockets took advice that we gave them on this program. I'll tell you what that is next on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
Thompson spins down the lane. Missed it. Left to the rim. Curry steals the rebound from Şengün. Hield for three. Good on the left corner. Could be night-night time here in H-Town.
Buddy Hield. Dagger three-pointer. Game 7 win for the Warriors over the Rockets in Houston. Mike Cousins on that call, courtesy of ESPN Radio. Buddy Hield, 33 points. Led all scorers in the game. Our next playoff broadcast here on ESPN 792.1 FM. Game 2 of the OKC and Denver series. SGA versus Joker. We are your home of the NBA playoffs. Speaking of the NBA, as we are a week away from the NBA draft lottery.
Biggest day in Jazz history, OC.
It's weirdly.
It feels like it, right? At least since the finals games.
It's one of the biggest days in Jazz history, certainly. I mean, obviously, you have to give credit to the acquisition, the sale of the team. You have to give credit to the retirement of Jerry Sloan. I think, probably you have to, like, honorable mention things like trading away Rudy Gobert and the Donovan Mitchell situation. But when you talk about things that could actually add to and help the Utah Jazz, a week from today is as big as it gets. Can you imagine being Will Hardy right now, knowing that, by the way, breaking news, Will Hardy has signed an extension with the Jazz, keeping him in place through 2031, which I love because we talked about this on the show. When you have asked a coach to engineer a tanking operation for you, you're basically telling them, hey, I want you to ruin your own resume for the sake of my team. And if you then don't reward that, you don't display loyalty in return to the loyalty being given to you, like, hey, I'm going to go against every competitive bone in my body. I'm going to do the thing that as a coach you are absolutely not supposed to do and just surrender, just capitulate and say, okay, we want the higher draft pick, whatever you think is cool. Like, that is brutal to have to do. And Will Hardy has done so, and he's done so while somehow threading that needle of figuring out how to develop the young players and to not alienate the veterans and have them be disgruntled. Do you know how remarkable it is that Lauri Markkanen is not putting up a stink?
Yeah, he's not asking for a trade.
Do you know how insane it is that even like Jordan Clarkson is not just like, dude, this is embarrassing for me. Get me out of here now. He might feel that way, but there's not the PR nightmare of having a beloved player, someone that the fan base has really welcomed and embraced and enjoys, be like, I hate this now. I don't want to be here anymore. That's a bad look for everyone when it does happen. As temporary as it is, it's just not great. And Will Hardy's managed all that very, very successfully. He's rewarded with a contract extension that keeps him in place through 2031. So that is, that's the backroom handshake. When the owner comes to you and is just like, you got to fail, man. Don't win games. If you have any leverage at all, which who knows whether Will Hardy does or did, you say, all right, you're going to be getting a call from my agent about the security I want long-term in exchange for doing this. Because this is the exact opposite of the job I was trained to do, I learned to do, and I want to do. So good on the Jazz. Not only because I think Will Hardy is a good coach and can be a winning coach, but also just the principle of the matter is when you are asking someone to do something that is counterintuitive and against their principles, you better make it worth their while. I think this contract extension, we haven't seen numbers on it. Have you seen numbers yet?
I have not.
I haven't seen numbers on it yet. I imagine the numbers are great. This is that, hey, you scratched our back, now we're going to scratch yours. Imagine, though, being Will Hardy and waiting to know if you're going to coach one of the future best players of the NBA, potentially, or if everyone is going to come into next year being like, gosh, damn it. We didn't even tank right. It didn't even work out when we tried to suck.
Yeah.
Imagine how nerve-wracking it is for Ryan Smith and Justin Zanuck, for everybody in that building right now, to be like, we are a week away from determining whether or not we get the guy that everybody in the universe wants or we get somebody else. And that somebody else, by the way, is probably going to be a really damn good basketball player.
Yeah, the top 5 player.
But it's just not going to be the guy that you have your hopes set on.
I will reiterate that for Jazz fans, I know that this isn't going to help. This isn't going to help anybody feel better if the Jazz don't get the number 1 overall pick come almost exactly a week from now. But I will reiterate, if you get the number 2 pick and Dylan Harper is the guy you get, that's still a worthwhile tank effort. It's not the sure thing that Cooper Flagg is, but it's as close to that as you can get. Now, you get 3rd and it's Ace Bailey or Trey Johnson or one of these other ones, then it doesn't feel near as worth it. But if you get the top 2, you still put yourself in position to have a star player, a star young player to go with, hopefully guys like Lauri Markkanen, really good now veteran player on your next contending team.
Walker Kessler's going to be here. I think they've made it pretty clear that they like him, and other teams are going to be gunning for it.
I know perfectly well that just saying that, people are still going to go insane, and a lot of gnashing of teeth will be happening if Cooper Flagg doesn't come this way. The lottery luck is not in Utah's favor, but the rational basketball fan in you should be excited at the thought of maybe Dylan Harper too. It's obviously not the guaranteed thing that Cooper Flagg seems to be.
So let me take you back to 1996, James.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The fall of 1996, if you were a young person and you walked into any store that sold electronics, back then Shopko was still a thing.
Yeah.
All right. Walked into what at the time was a pretty new Super Target in Sandy, Utah.
Or pre-Walmart super centers, right? Just regular Walmarts.
If you're walking into
there.
these places, they have, again, this is old school, but people are going to remember, they have the display video game systems that are like locked in some clear screened vault. All right. And we saw for the very first time in 1996 the Nintendo 64 display model. All right. With the Super Mario World 3D. You're familiar with Mario, but you saw him in a 2-dimensional side scroll your whole life. All right. Even the beloved Super Nintendo Mario Kart was like pretty underwhelming from a graphics standpoint. And then Nintendo 64 got released in the fall of 96, and it was glorious. It was captivating. It was like hearing the Beatles for the first time. You were just like, what is that? And you would wait. I would wait in line while my mom went to go shop. I would wait behind invariably the other kids that were already playing the display model to just try to get a couple moments on that Nintendo 64,
Play
right?
the demo version. Yeah, I used to do that with the PlayStation versions at those kind of stores. Yeah.
So I was dead set on that's what I needed Santa Claus to bring us for Christmas. Like, my parents were so awesome at Christmas time. If you wanted a big ticket item, that was a Santa Claus request. All right? You wanted a new bike, Santa Claus was going to bring the new bike. You wanted and I was like, to my older brother, I was like, let's ask for this from Santa Claus. And he was like, I don't know, maybe. Okay? We were begging. I was begging Santa Claus for this Nintendo 64. And in my mind, I had my heart and mind and hopes set on getting, for Christmas, the Nintendo 64. With Wave Race, the game, which is, in hindsight, just the stupidest game.
At the time, looked like the greatest thing.
It was jet skis racing. There was maybe 6 different tracks.
Yeah.
What? Why do you want that game? Anyway, wanted that, and the console came with the Mario game, right? That we had played in the store a few times. And I just, in my mind, I had set the expectation. That's what Christmas was going to be. I was going to get from Santa Claus, I was going to get Nintendo 64. And like no other outcome was going to be acceptable. No matter how cool that present was, I had all of my dreams set on the Nintendo 64. So people remember, maybe, if you're older than me, you may remember, if you had kids back in 1996, that was like the Furby era. That was the Tickle Me Elmo era. The supply chain was not exactly thriving in the way that it does now. You could not get it by just, I'm just going to walk in and grab one. Limited supply and insane demand. So Santa Claus was not able to procure a Nintendo 64.
Oh, no.
Now, what Santa Claus did bring me was an incredible boombox. All right?
Okay.
It was awesome. Do you think I appreciated that at all?
No.
Do you think I enjoyed that at all? Do you think
I mean, eventually you enjoyed it.
Yeah, but do you think that on Christmas I was like grateful and smiling and happy about the boombox, James? No, I was an insufferable little turd who was just bothered that he didn't get a Nintendo 64. That's how people are going to be if you get Dylan Harper.
Yeah.
If VJ Edgecombe is on his way to Salt Lake City, you're going to be like, if on May 12th, a week from today, the Utah Jazz pull the number 2 pick in the upcoming NBA draft, everyone is going to be like I was in 1996 with no Nintendo 64. And you know what? Just like with no Nintendo 64, you're never going to get Cooper Flagg. If you don't draft him. No, listen. If you don't draft him, I never got a Nintendo 64, James. I never owned one. I've never in my life, still to this day, had a Nintendo 64. So my point is, that's the only way you're going to get it. The only way that I was going to get that Nintendo 64 is if Santa Claus brought that thing to me. I guess I could buy one now.
Yeah. Go on eBay or something.
Go on eBay. But Cooper Flagg, it's like, it's that package that's either going to be there or not on Christmas morning. You're either going to get it or you're not. It is a binary outcome. It is a yes or a no. It is as black and white as it gets. And collectively, the millions of American, well, I guess not American, probably mostly Americans, the millions of Utah Jazz fans are either going to be happy a week from today or they're going to be petulant little jerks like I was at Christmas 19 years ago.
I fully expect that.
Was that night? That was 29 years ago. Why did I say 19? Gosh,
that would be 2006, my guy.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I thought you were going to take us back to when Greg Popovich became the head coach of the Spurs and do some kind of Spurs transition to the Will Hardy extension. But that was a very good analogy, OC.
I'm glad that in the middle of spring, people are okay with a little Christmas analogy.
Absolutely. No, you're totally right. And that's why I say, even though I'm doing my best to remind people that Dylan Harper is also a really good player and that this year should not feel like a worthless tank effort if that's who you end up getting, I know that that's going to be the reaction because we have done what you just said. We've built it up in our heads that that's the prize, and that's the only prize that's worth it.
By the way, the analogy continues. I got like 10 good years out of that boombox. It ended up being a great gift. Just like Harper or Edgecombe or Bailey or whoever could also be a great gift for 10 years. But guess what? What your heart is set on, what your dreams are built around are that one thing, that one shiny new toy, that item that you've elevated in your mind. And you know, like, had I gotten the Nintendo 64, maybe it wouldn't have even been that great. I certainly wouldn't have played it for 10 years. Anyway.
Yeah, me personally, I'm going to have the letdown that everyone else is going to have if it's the third pick or worst.
Okay.
That's personally.
That's your line?
Yeah, I'm going to have a bit of a letdown if you don't get the number one pick. But not near as big of a letdown as I anticipate the average Jazz fan is going to have if they get the number 2, if they get 2 or lower. For me, the threshold is the third pick, and you're still going to get a really good player, but they're not as sure of a thing as obviously Cooper Flagg and a little less obviously Dylan Harper. So that's why, for me, that's where my that's where the major letdown's going to come for me, if that turns out to be the case. And let's not speak it into existence, though, OC. Come on now.
Do you feel like we are gonna be the problem?
I mean, we did.
If it doesn't happen,
we did convince the Utah Jazz to give Will Hardy an extension after we said, "What if Mitch Johnson doesn't work out in San Antonio?"
You know what? Actually, that was supposed to be the whole point of this discussion.
It ended up being draft lottery, which is fine.
We were talking on Friday about Greg Popovich stepping away. They elevate a 38-year-old Mitch Johnson to take over permanently. And nobody likes to be the guy after the guy, right? There are folks out there who think that might be kind of a short leash situation for somebody like Mitch Johnson. And then, well, what if 2 years down the line, a more developed Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox and all this, now it's time to bring in the ringer, bring in the coach, the Steve Kerr that you think can get you over the hump, right? Mark Jackson couldn't, but maybe Steve Kerr can. That was the Will Hardy proposal for us. Like, you watch out, or the Ime Udoka.
Or Ime Udoka with Houston. Udoka has not been extended yet.
Conversations ongoing, allegedly.
Okay.
Now,
but Will Hardy has been officially extended.
Will Hardy has been extended, so, like, put that discussion to bed. San Antonio Spurs, lose his number, all right? You're not talking
He doesn't
to Will
like
Hardy.
you anymore.
That's our guy now, all right? He thought you were getting kind of fat anyway, San Antonio Spurs.
We joke that they listened to us. They probably didn't. But
no, don't say that. What do you mean? Speak for yourself. I'm not putting that out there. They probably did listen.
It's great timing. This extension could not have been a better timing for the Utah Jazz, and absolutely a fantastic move. Whether they were working on it before Pop decided to retire, or if they just decided we're throwing this together because we don't want our coach to have a wandering eye about his old girlfriend. Okay, we want you committed to us. Just a very shrewd move by Justin Zanuck, Danny Ainge and company.
I'm watching a bunch of UFL highlights right now on my screen, and it is fascinating to watch pretty darn good football on the field and nobody in the stands. I don't know what is going to have to happen for the UFL or an alternative league to get any kind of love, any kind of traction, any kind of attendance, but, man, dark days. All right. Enough prattling on about my Christmas presents. Sean O'Connell Show continues next on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show here on ESPN 792 on FM. Shehan Jayaraja is going to join us from CBS Sports in 8 or so minutes, and we're going to talk about just a little. It's not even an article he put out, just a little, like, he posed a question that a lot of people have about where Cam Rising has been. We don't have a better answer than just like around, but we'll talk about that a little bit, and we'll talk about where college football is heading, where the NFL draft is heading. We found out in 2027 where they're going to have the draft. That one is it's going to be interesting. I think I might go to that one, James. We'll plan this far ahead. We'll get to all that with Shehan Jayaraja. This weekend was the perfect weekend for you as a homeowner to realize that it might be time to get those old windows checked out, because this is one of the things that makes living in Utah so unique. We get these extreme weather changes, right? It was hot this weekend. It got up to 80-something degrees. Suddenly, the energy efficiency of your home matters. You're turning on the AC, and you're wondering if this thing's going to cool down in time for you to go to bed and have a good night's sleep. And then, of course, you turn the page, you wake up the next day, suddenly it's clouds, it's rain, a little bit of sleet if you're in high enough elevation. And again, you need the right windows, keeping not only the moisture out, but the cold out as well, because in spring, you get both. In fall, you get both. Sometimes in winter or summer, you get both. You need your home to be sealed in, energy efficient, and you need new windows to make that happen. Advanced Windows can hook you up. They've been hooking us up and our listeners up for 30-plus years. Lifetime warranty on the windows. The sales is done here in Utah. The manufacturing done here in Utah. Installation done by a Utah crew. And then that warranty, that lifetime warranty, will be serviced by a Utah team. Right here in Salt Lake City, I can take you down to the showroom. If you're not convinced, I can knock on the door. Jake's going to be there. Nate Orchard's going to be there. They can tell you a lot more about it than I could. And obviously, they've got everything you need to cover up those windows, the blinds, the shutters, all the great stuff as well. Advanced Windows, hook it up, ESPN 700 listeners, with $2,500 off, 10 windows or more. Get on the schedule right now. 801-850-9100. Advanced Window Products. Tell them that OC sent you. You can go to advancedwindows.com if you don't want to talk to anybody on the phone, but 801-850-9100. Great way to get a hold of them. And if you think your windows are fine, but you're not sure what that moisture between the panes is coming from, just have somebody come out. You don't have to do a whole home replacement of windows, but you can with Advanced Windows, and you know they'll get the job done right. 801-850-9100. That's Advanced Window Products. So we were talking about the transfer portal. We were talking about the potential for an executive order. We were talking about NIL and whether or not it is ruining college football. And one thing that we have to acknowledge as folks that are here in the state of Utah is that your opinion of this is obviously going to be based on how it affects your team, how it affects your local team, your rooting interest. There's not a lot of folks in Texas right now that are saying that the transfer portal and NIL are ruining college football. There are not a lot of folks even in South Bend, Indiana, a traditional powerhouse, that are like, oh, yeah, man, it's bad. Transfer portal's bad. They made it to a national championship. The line between the haves and the have-nots is not as distinct as I wish it was in college football, because I think it would solidify and simplify the process of knowing who can compete and who should be chasing these national championship college football playoff things and who should be maybe, like, I don't know, gracefully bowing out or trying to reorganize or trying to figure out if there's an alternative that would actually make sense. We were just talking about the spring football leagues, the professional football leagues. I mean, maybe that's a niche that you can carve out if you're the Mountain West on down, where you break away from the Power Four and you say, hey, we're going to be, instead of playing in the traditional college football season opposite Clemson and Ohio State and the NFL, we're going to play in the spring. It'll be us, and we'll do it on Saturdays, and then the Michigan Panthers will do it on Sundays. I don't know, but the reason that problem always comes to mind for me is because we are in a place with the universities here in the state of Utah that you're not obviously on one side of the line or the other. Utah is obviously trying to stay on the correct side of the line. BYU is obviously trying to stay on the correct side of the line. Utah State knows that inevitably they're not all the way on the right side of that line.
They're gradually trying to make that climb, now joining that new Pac-12, which is going to be basically a glorified Mountain West, but they're trying to get there. Utah and BYU, like you said, right now are on. Feels like they're on the right side of things, but you don't know for sure long term.
Okay, so sorry for the random aside here, but Greg Popovich, you saw this, the Greg Popovich press conference where he took off the jacket and said he's El Jefe now.
Yeah.
One thing that is so important to why everyone in the NBA and why the Utah Jazz are continuing to try and model their franchise after the San Antonio Spurs and so many teams look up to and respect this organization, Greg Popovich obviously went through a pretty significant health scare. It's changed his job status. Look who is flanking Greg Popovich as he's having this conversation. Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili are standing up there with their coach. That is not how it goes in a lot of NBA organizations, especially not in 2025. You could go back. One of the things that shocked me when Jerry Sloan, I remember this is like, I was working in radio for a few months at the time. I had just gotten my first full-time radio gig over at the old Simmons Media. Same boss, different building. I had a co-host. Hans Olsen was my co-host at the time. Jerry Sloan leaves like that year.
Mid-season.
Yeah. Do you remember? You were probably too young, James. Do you remember who of the active roster players were there at the announcement?
Yeah, no.
Andre Kirilenko.
Is that it?
That's it. And then Karl Malone came into town, and he was at a game a few games later, right? And he spoke to the media for obvious reasons. Everyone wanted to talk to Karl, get his thoughts on Jerry leaving. And I said, what do you think about the fact that only Andre Kirilenko was there? It was probably the first question I asked. Again, I'm brand new on the job. Probably the first question I asked in a media scrum to anyone besides Jerry. And Karl Malone looked at me. And he was like, "What did you say?" I was like, wait, did he not hear me, or was he mad about what I said?
That's always the thing that comes to mind when they go, "What was that?"
So I repeated myself.
Yeah.
And Karl was just like, "I didn't know that. Do you think that I would have been there or John would have been there?" And I just kind of shrugged, and he's like, "Exactly." It wasn't a great answer, but it was like the point that he was trying to make got across. Greg Popovich is standing here changing roles. Tim Duncan does not work for the Spurs.
I think, is he not anymore? He was an assistant coach for a second.
Is he working for them right now?
I
thought he was not anymore.
Maybe he left, but I'll look it up here. You continue your point.
Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili obviously made their careers with Greg Popovich and are there standing, not like sitting in the audience. They're standing with him, and when he's turning around and he's a little unsteady on his feet because he had that mild stroke, those are the guys that he's leaning on. It's like metaphorically, symbolically, but also literally such a tight-knit core in San Antonio. So I had to call attention to that because I see it, and now they're showing his head coaching tree, and it's Will Hardy's there, Doc Rivers, Steve Kerr, Ime Udoka, Mitch Johnson, Quinn Snyder, Mike Budenholzer, Taylor Jenkins, Monty Williams, Mike Brown, Brett Brown, Becky Hammond. All have played or coached under Greg Popovich.
Yeah, neither of them work for the Spurs right now.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, Duncan was an assistant, but you're right. That was a few years ago. He stepped down.
They're just there for their guy,
which is amazing.
Anyway, pretty cool stuff. Didn't mean to take that random tangent, but I think it matters when you're talking about someone as universally as respected as Greg Popovich, because there's like different levels to that. Everyone has nice things to say about certain people in whatever industry, but are you going to be there? Are you going to show up? Are you going to be standing there next to him? And when he needs a shoulder to steady himself on, is that you as a megastar player for him? Or is that some random staffer who's told to stand up there next to him so that he doesn't fall over? It's a Hall of Famer. It's two of them. Where you at, Tony Parker? France? He owns a team in France. He's probably got, like, actual duties. Anyway. Didn't mean to throw shade at Tony. No strays for Tony Parker. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Shahan Jayaraja joins us next on Utah's #1 sports talk. Welcome to hour number 3 of the Sean O'Connell Show. Welcome in one of our favorite guests, Shahan Jayaraja from CBS Sports, college football insider. Shahan, welcome again. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
We brought you on. This is a super unfair thing to do because you had in CBS Sports, the college football news, the "Where is Cam Rising?" question was posed. And so, you know, we should probably have a better answer to that than you because we're right here. I mean, he lives a block away from where I'm broadcasting this show right now. And I thought it was a great question to be asked at a time when there were, you know, fewer and fewer questions being brought up on a daily basis in college football. I just want your kind of overarching thoughts on the "Where's Waldo?" but with Cam Rising in place.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? Because, you know, Kyle Whittingham never really explicitly said, hey, Cam Rising is no longer a part of our program. He kind of said, look, we'll let Cam make that announcement himself, but he kind of never made that announcement. And I inquired a couple of times at Utah to kind of ask, like, hey, do you have a formal answer? They really didn't. And, I talked to one or two people who are around that building, and they were kind of like, look, he's kind of disappeared. Like, he kind of is just off in his own world now. And, it's fascinating, right? Because technically Cam does have the 2025 season available to him as a potential injury redshirt for the 2024 season, as well as some rule changes from before. So he could come back to college football. Now, he downplayed that possibility last year before he got injured, of course, saying, 7 years was enough. And from what we're hearing, that seems to have been the case. He didn't apply for any additional years of eligibility, which Cal Whittingham and Utah had expressed openness to after he suffered his season-ending injury last season. And the other thing, too, is that, we've heard some rumblings that the injury has kind of lingered a little longer than expected. And, so realistically, especially at this juncture, he wasn't going to be able to truly try out for the NFL, be an NFL draft pick, get into a training camp, because there's still question about whether he's healthy. So he's kind of caught in an interesting situation where I imagine he's just trying to figure out what's going to happen next.
There's a couple guys, but Brant Keithy, I think, is in a similar situation. He did as much as he could of the combine and the pro day type stuff, although he's still in a rehab process himself. And there's an assumption for all of us who watch these guys through their college careers. They're like, oh, yeah, they're going to do whatever they can to keep playing the game of football for as long as they can. Of course, none of us experience the highs and the lows that they did. None of us have gone through, in the case of both of these individuals I'm referencing, multiple seasons with season-ending injuries and multiple surgeries and long rehab processes. And, you've been around and covering the game for a long time. How often is it that we see a guy just like he's had enough, or his body has had enough, even if his brain wants to continue, that the ability's there from a technique standpoint, but not necessarily from a physicality and explosiveness or speed standpoint anymore?
Well, it's funny, right? Because I think that, you go back, let's say, a decade, and the dynamics around decisions like this were so different. Because, one, players were typically racing to leave college, not to stay in college, because they were trying to get to the next level or to whatever was next in life so that they could start making money. And that dynamic has obviously shifted back the other direction with the advent of NIL and essentially pay-per play. So, you're seeing players continue to try to find new eligibility, find ways to come back, create more good situations. And I think that Cam, I think that Brant Keithy, another player that I wrote about, Quinn Ewers from Texas, obviously a different situation in terms of like he was able to go through the workout process for the NFL draft. But like, I think that it's almost becoming kind of like a mini dynamic change to where more of these guys are going back to the idea of like, hey, you know what, maybe it's just time to be done playing college football. It's great for Cam, obviously, that he got as many shots as he did. He got 7 chances to go try to play college football. But, at a certain point too, right? I mean, Cam's going to be, I think, 26 in a few weeks here. Like he is a grown man. And even though he obviously put together a tremendous career at Utah, one that should be remembered for a long time, it does sort of beg the question after a while, what are you doing here? And when are you just ready to move on from this? I think that, again, to make the comparison in a different way to Quinn Ewers, like Quinn decided it's time for me to leave Texas, and yeah, maybe I can get a one-time payout to transfer somewhere else, but is it really going to be better for me to leave and kind of lose the legacy I was able to have at Texas by just trying to get a quick payout or try to, squeeze one more year out of it? And I think that, for Cam, again, like that has to be part of the factor too, is like you get the chance to leave as a 2-time conference champion quarterback at Utah, one of the better quarterbacks that they've had in a very long time. And that's a legacy that I think that, maybe it won't pay off in the next year, but I think in the next 20, it just might.
I wish that Cam Rising's, I don't think he's going to get that storybook ending. I'm with you. I think he's just kind of done. I wish that his career had ended in more of a glorious fashion, because I have a deep appreciation for the fact that he is the guy that got Utah over the hump of winning Pac-12 championships instead of just competing for Pac-12 championships, and it's something that should not be lost, and we're going to do our best on this show to make sure it's not lost. And I agree with you. I think that, maybe we get like, I don't know, some silence, some radio silence for Cam like we've had for the last several months, until it's time for him to, circle back into a place where it can help him out job-wise, career-wise, coaching connection-wise, whatever. I hope it all works out the way it's supposed to for him, because he did some special things for this program and hopefully got compensated appropriately for it. Speaking of compensation, we've discussed many times in many different angles the way that NIL has changed the college football landscape. And CBS was reporting that, maybe an executive order could be coming from the office of the president after a meeting between Nick Saban and Donald Trump. What could an executive order aimed at NIL even look like, in your thoughts?
It's a great question. And, I think that's certainly the biggest thing that you have to ask, like you said, is like, what would it even be about necessarily? Would it be that, the executive would say, hey, you're capped to this amount, you have to be this transparent? Like, those are things that certainly you wouldn't imagine would hold up to any sort of court challenge. But obviously the dynamics are very different between the NCAA having to deal with court challenges and the executive branch. Obviously, it would just be part of a much bigger, more complicated political reality that we live in. So I think that the big question would be, okay, I think that there would be some sort of push to sort of, I guess, codify binding contracts. I do think that would most likely be a part of what the conversation would be about. And again, what we have to think about as well is, while obviously the executive order would come from the executive office, the thing that would be most interesting is that it will be shaped, you would imagine, by, like you said, those conversations with Nick Saban and conversations that we also heard that President Trump had with Tommy Tuberville on Friday. And so I do think that there would be sort of a nudge towards like, hey, how can you put some of this genie back in the bottle? How can you use the power of the executive branch to try to limit some of this freedom of movement, limit some of this, unfettered Wild West markets? And again, one of the big challenges has been, look, that there is support from both Democrats and Republicans to fix some of what's going on with college sports. The question has continued to be, how should we do that? And I think that would be the case as well, even if an executive order came down.
Yeah, we'll see. By the way, somebody who had a lot of success in the Wild West world of like New York real estate, then signing an order that says, hey, we don't want this anymore, it seems a little counterintuitive for me. But I stay away from politics most of the time because of stuff like that.
It's a fascinating reality, right? I mean, the thing is, again, like, whatever you want to say about what's going on, I mean, the big issue that college football has had has been those legal challenges. And again, if all of a sudden, a legal challenge means having to, contend with the Attorney General's office and the executive branch, like, it's just a different level of backing that you could get. Now, I think the other thing as well, in terms of long-term positioning, is I would wonder if, okay, maybe we get a short-term executive order that puts a little bit of pressure on the Senate and on Congress. Because, again, this is a bipartisan issue. This is an issue that both blue state senators and red state senators have taken up in different ways. So I wonder if the most positive thing that could come from it, if not obviously, reporting or projecting it, but I do wonder if the most positive thing that could come about is, hey, you know what, it lights a fire under some of these stakeholders like Cory Booker, Richard Blumenthal, Tommy Tuberville, Ted Cruz, a lot of people who have investment in this issue, and ultimately it helps nudge towards a long-term resolution.
Shehan Jayarajah, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking all things in the college football world. Sean, if you were told that a work suspension was coming down, what time of year would you choose to serve that suspension? Let's say that you're like, I come to you, I'm your boss, I say, hey man, 2 weeks. You got to be out for 2 weeks. When are you electing to serve that suspension?
Well, I think for me, look, I live in the great state of Texas. When you can get away for 2 weeks during the summer, I think that's just about ideal.
Okay. I obviously am referencing the suspension coming down for Sharon Moore, the Michigan coach. It's not going to be the season opener. It's not going to be Oklahoma week 2. He is instead going to sit out Central Michigan and Nebraska. I saw you tweeting about this as well. I love that coaches can do this in college sports. I mean, especially at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh did the same thing, but they're just like, they pick and choose. Yeah, punish us, but don't punish us when the team needs us.
Well, and it's so fascinating, right? Because if there's anybody who obviously knows how to deal with the NCAA at this point, it's the University of Michigan after what they've done and been charged with the past couple of years. But this one really takes the cake for me because, so for people who don't know, Sharon Moore was an offensive lineman at the University of Oklahoma. So, look, this is potentially in some ways a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him to get to go on the road and coach at his alma mater at the University of Oklahoma. But, it's just so crazy in so many ways. The idea that he's just like, well, yeah, that weekend doesn't work for me. We're going to do week 3 and week 4 instead. Now, I do think that there was a concerted effort to say, hey, we have to suspend him for one real game, right? So he will be away for the Nebraska game at least. And by the way, I think it could be a really, really high-quality game. Nebraska has a chance, I think, to be a breakout team in 2025 in a lot of ways. But at the same time, you're just sitting here like, what do you mean? We've had these examples of players getting suspended for the first half of the opener and, Johnny Manziel obviously being one of those, Baker Mayfield, whoever. But, this is really one of the more amusing ones that we've seen. Now, I will say, right, so when you look at the Connor Stalions case and the state of it within Michigan, so many of the people who were involved are now no longer there. Obviously, Connor Stalions is not in college football. Most of Michigan staff, including Jim Harbaugh, are now in the NFL in various places. So it kind of is just Sharon Moore who's left holding the bag in some ways. So I get why they're trying to institute some stuff to get around it. And, look, I expect that the NCAA will ask for a little bit more punishment at some point, but again, this is an attempt to try to move beyond it. And I said this back in 2023, whenever obviously this was all kind of unfolding. Michigan is willing to deal with 2 years of annoyances and complications if it leads to a national championship. It's what made that 2023 season so high pressure for the team, is that they knew this was our shot. But you know what? Banners fly forever, and I think that certainly nobody there regrets it too much.
I think that if we took a survey, it would be shocking how many people are like, "Yep, we're cool with this," or not shocking, I guess. Troy Dannon is on the college football selection committee now, the playoff selection committee, and so is Jeff Long. How much does the membership, the individual composition, actually matter in your mind when it comes to this college football playoff selection committee?
Well, I will say it's a little weird to see Jeff Long come back. He's I believe the first return member that we've seen. He was the initial chair of the college football playoff when he was the athletic director at, I believe, Arkansas at the time. But, I think in practice, it probably doesn't matter that much. I've had the opportunity to go through the mock selection committee that they do with media, actually on 2 separate occasions. And, what you kind of realize is that there's a little bit of just kind of a pathway and a logic to how they do these things. And, and so I think that a lot of the way that this stuff is selected does come down to the idea of hey, here's how the information is presented, here's how the criteria is presented, and there might be a little bit of waffling from one spot to the next. But the other thing too is that when you compare the playoff committee's selections to even the old BCS formula, the vast majority of the places are still the same. And by the way, this is actually even less of an issue when you get to 12 teams as opposed to 4, because you're not having to decide necessarily how many teams are getting left in or left out. Like the team that was left out last year was Alabama, the 12th team, and not Florida State, an undefeated conference champion. So I don't think it matters all that much. Now, I will say too, I feel like it's a little silly personally that we have sitting athletic directors on the committee because, one, obviously, they really do go to great lengths to try to prevent against conflict of interest. So if you have a school that you are tied to and that you or a family member receive compensation from, you have to recuse yourself during that whole process. But it's also like at a certain point, like, well, why have so many people who have direct ties? Like why was the University of Michigan's athletic director a key member of the committee in the year that Michigan was set to be the number 1 seed? Like why was that part of the calculus? And again, like athletic directors, while obviously they are competent in their own ways, like most of them are not hired because of their schematic football knowledge. So like it's always been a little odd to me that the committee is so athletic director heavy, but I do think that whether it's this 13 or whether it's another, most of the time I think the rankings will end up pretty similar to what they end up being.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Would the process benefit from, I guess, outsourcing to the point you're making? Like athletic directors are not necessarily experts in evaluating which team is best in college football. Why not have a Shahan Jeyarajah? Why not bring in some random wild card of a dude whose job is to be the devil's advocate and to argue against the conclusions to stimulate more conversation? I mean, is there something we could do to make it less of a predictable outcome, or is that predictability good?
Yeah, I think that predictability, relatively speaking, is good. Now, I do think that one thing that I'll say is I think that just by nature of the way that these things are selected, you basically have 2 types of people in that room. It's either 1, active athletic directors, or 2, for the most part, people who are like pretty old and retired. And so like you do get like a perspective in this room that probably leans a little more old school. Like you have people, who are older coaches, like Tom Osborne was on the committee, many years ago. And like, again, it's just like if you have in this moment, for example, like different schools of thought on football. So like you don't have just hypothetically like an air raid coach in there. You don't have necessarily high powered offensive guys. And I think that we've seen in some previous years, like the old school mentality, the defense, the bounce football, that sort of stuff has impacted the way that they rank some teams over others. So I do think that that's one piece that I would like to see. Is I would like to see a little bit maybe more diversity of age and background, and just in terms of like guys who come from an offensive background or quarterbacks or wide receivers, in addition to obviously some of the more old school tough coaches of the past couple of years. So I think that that's really where I'd like to see some variety. Because the biggest way that they decide right now who they put on the committee is they do kind of categorize it by conference. And there's value to that and there's merit to that, of course. But, I think that like some of the most interesting guys they've had on the committee are, for example, a guy like John Urschel, who is a former NFL player, still a pretty young guy who's an MIT physicist. And so like, I think that there are different ways to mix things up and not necessarily just have to include people who maybe their time in college football was at its peak 30 years ago.
I can't believe this next question is going to come out of my mouth, but do we need to stage some sort of intervention and save Bill Belichick?
I think that people can make their own decisions, and I think that people can do business with whoever they feel like doing business with. But it certainly is pretty striking how the early bit of this has gone. I mean, I think that the thing that's been the most interesting to me is just like how amorphous the relationship has been in terms of, I guess sort of trying to figure out like who's in charge of certain things, right? And I also wonder as well, how much knowledge does North Carolina have on how, I guess, Bill Belichick's representation are involved in the process. It's such a strange dynamic, and I saw somebody put it well. I mean, if there was somebody who we would wonder, would their personal life maybe overshadow their professional life heading into a college football job? This is not the first guy that you would have thought of.
Well, that's why I said I can't believe I'm asking this question. It's the question of who's in charge has never once applied to anything associated with Bill Belichick, at least not once he received, a lot of attention and fame as the head coach of the Patriots. Even with Tom Brady in the building and Robert Kraft, who's relatively hands-on, you were like, yeah, well, but Bill's the one who's in charge. And now we don't know because he's got a 20-something-year-old girlfriend. It's wild.
Yeah, it's unique. I don't think that we've ever seen anything quite like this in college football.
Shahan, love talking to you. Always enjoy picking your brain. Thanks for your time again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Shahan Jayaraja from CBS Sports, National College Football Insider. Of course, I was referencing the ongoing saga with Bill Belichick, his book publicity tour, the Jordan Hudson, his girlfriend / controller. Whatever's going on there is very, very strange. And I aired a grievance on Friday about the fact that we don't get, or at least at this moment, we're not going to get the proposed North Carolina football Hard Knocks documentary because of her meddling and involvement. Again, the grievance was not against her. It was against Bill for allowing her that much control and access. But it's very, very strange. And I wonder if we need to be checking his video appearances for him blinking out Morse code messages of distress. Very odd. Sean O'Connell Show. We got 28 minutes left. We've got some golf to give away in about 15 minutes. We've got 18 holes to Stonebridge as part of our Festival of Tees brought to you by the Utah Golf Association. So make sure you stick around for that. Donovan Mitchell. I never thought I would say this. Donovan Mitchell broke a Michael Jordan record. And we have to talk about how meaningful it is in the NBA playoffs. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
matchup here. Mitchell against Halliburton. Doing his dance. One to shoot. Mitchell the scoop. Missed it. Well played by Halliburton.
And then
beautiful fade. Siakam.
Late fast break bucket for the Pacers. They upset the Cavs in game 1 of the second round series in the East. That sound courtesy of TNT Sports. Spiro Ditas was on the call. Game 2 of Thunder Nuggets series Wednesday night right here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 792.1 FM, your home of the NBA playoffs. Speaking of NBA playoffs, James Peterson, do you know the Michael Jordan record that Donovan Mitchell was able to break in this loss to the Indiana Pacers in game 1?
It wasn't championships.
It was not. He does not have as many rings as MJ does.
It's got to be some kind of scoring record, right?
Yes.
That's the only thing that comes to mind.
Okay, so Donovan Mitchell scored 33 points in the loss.
Okay.
His 8th straight game 1 of a playoff series, scoring 30 points or more.
Oh.
Michael Jordan, 7 times.
That's
actually twice. He did that twice. Game 1 of playoff series, multiple playoff series, 7 times, 30 points or more in game 1. Michael Jordan did it from 97 to 98 and 91 to 93. He did it 6 times in a row from 89 to 90. Kobe Bryant scored 30 points in game 1 in 2000 from 2010 to 2012. Wilt Chamberlain from 1960 to 1964. And, of course, Alex English. Can't forget about Alex English.
Oh, my gosh.
5 game 1 30-point performances in a row.
The one that's most like Donovan Mitchell on that list. Alex
Is Donovan
English.
Mitchell the best game 1 player ever? The record books say yes.
Yeah, I mean, from an offensive standpoint, can't really argue with those numbers. I bring up Alex English as the most like Donovan Mitchell out of that list because really good player for his time, not an all-time great like the rest of those guys, and obviously not the championship pedigree. Unfortunately, when you hear about Donovan Mitchell breaking these kinds of records, setting these kinds of records, you kind of have to shrug and go, cool story, bro. Like, you still haven't done anything meaningful.
Here's the thing that if you're a professional player in whatever sport now, but especially in basketball or a quarterback in football, your stats don't mean anything until you win a championship.
It's true.
And that's, I mean, it's probably unfair, especially the quarterback thing, because you are one of 22 guys.
You don't play both sides of the ball like in basketball. Yeah.
In basketball, though, like, because of the accomplishments of Michael Jordan and LeBron James and Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal and all these guys, and going even further back to Bill Russell's,
if you just go off that list,
Kareem's,
Wilt, you mentioned Wilt, like if you just go off that list, like Donovan and Alex English are extreme outliers compared to the other, was it 3 or 4 guys? There's 3 guys, and their career accomplishments.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that obviously, you know, one thing breeds another. When you're a record setter, you're often a game winner, and when you're a game winner and a record setter, you put those things together, you're hopefully winning championships. And there's plenty of guys, there's plenty of examples of, you know, to the contrary. Karl Malone is one of those, won a bunch of games, set a bunch of records, never won a championship, right? John Stockton, same thing. And it's the ignominious honor of being one of those great but never won it. The Charles Barkley's, like, that sucks. Dan Marino, that whole, like, that reputational black spot is just brutal.
The current guy that is that way is James Harden. James Harden is the modern, for the NBA, he's the modern Karl Malone. He's the modern Dan Marino to cross-sport comparison.
That's actually an interesting comparison. I feel like James Harden, I mean, from a number standpoint, you're absolutely right.
MVP, too. Like, he's been at the top of the league in everything but winning a championship. And with James, it's about him coming up small too often in the biggest playoff moments. And that was a criticism outside of this market about Karl Malone, too, unfortunately. But Karl was a lot more reliable than James Harden has been.
It's just a wild deal, the way that follows you around. And I don't think, I mean, it probably should. I'm not even
Being
disputing
critical of
that
it, yeah.
that it should be, like for quarterbacks, wins and championship wins, especially as a quarterback stat. I'm still in between on that. I'm still not sure if that's the right way.
It was a little
for us
too
to
harsh.
judge people.
Yeah.
But for these basketball players, when you do everything else, when you check every other box, like you're an all-star, okay, great. That's like kind of the first thing, probably. Am I an all-star caliber player? Yes. All right. Do I win the scoring title? Am I leading the league in any particular statistical category? Like that, of course, makes you an all-star in most cases. But like at some point, you have to say, okay, he's a great player, but in order for us to talk about him the way we talk about great players, like truly great players, he has to have all the things on the resume that those guys had. And unfortunately, if you're in the modern NBA, modern baseball, modern football, one of the things that you got to have is a championship. The same is true in hockey, right? We would not give a bleep about Alex Ovechkin passing up Wayne Gretzky's goals record if he had not won a Stanley Cup. If he doesn't, like Joe Mauer. You know Joe Mauer.
Yeah.
Great. Like one of the best players of his generation. Will he ever be considered that, like from a casual conversational standpoint? No.
No, unfortunately, your Twins failed to get out of the division series every year. They made the playoffs almost every year, but they could not advance with Joe Mauer.
He probably should have gone and played football instead.
Yeah, it's true.
He was the number one football player in the country.
He was a heck of an athlete, Joe Mauer.
Like Mike Trout, I'm really, really curious to see, not right now, but 10 years from now, how do we talk about Mike Trout?
Well, especially with the emergence of Shohei. If Shohei hadn't burst onto the scene and been his teammate too, like I think people like baseball purists would still be saying Mike Trout's best player in the game by far, one of the best players of all time. And then I don't care about his lack of postseason appearance and lack of postseason success. That's just fact. And now Shohei Ohtani has completely outshined him.
Well, he was like widely regarded, almost universally regarded as the best player in the game.
Some people said greatest of all time. There were those kind of people out there. That
people that said that he has those capabilities, and then he became the second best player on his own team.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, okay. So,
and those same people who say he's one of the greatest to ever play the game, we're talking about Mike Trout, those same people would say he's probably number 2 now. Like that's how good Mike Trout's considered to be. But yeah, like when you're not number 1, when you don't have that critical acclaim that Mike Trout has anymore, that Mike Trout used to have anymore, and you're not doing anything relevant in the postseason, like that's a recipe for being forgotten.
And again, in certain sports, it makes more sense than other sports. In hockey and in basketball, it probably makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
In baseball and in football, I mean, especially if you're a positional player in baseball, and the fact, like, you could be a great, like Mike Trout has been, and just not have pitching to support that for your whole career, and there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
Another reason why Shohei gets to pull the trump card, because he's just like,
I can affect both sides.
I don't like the pitching. I'll just hop out on there on the mound.
As long as he doesn't have to have Tommy John surgery again, knock on wood. But yeah, like I still am a fan of Donovan Mitchell. I think despite some of the criticism that Donovan got on his way out here, I think that the majority of Jazz fans are still big fans of Donovan Mitchell and want to see and root for his success, and probably always will. And I'm in that boat. I'm a little bit tired of his I'm one of the best players in the NBA shtick. He's got this strut like, hey, treat me like I'm an all-time great franchise player, and not coming up short when it matters. 8 straight game ones. Lost a game you should have won at home, for example.
You don't want to be like, you don't want to come up at the end of it when it's all said and done and be game 1 Donovan. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
What's up, game one? You go out. You go to like all the old all-time greats, the top 50 players of the 2020s. You go to that celebration, and it's like, oh, game one, what's up? And that's the thing. That's your reputation when your career's over.
And it wouldn't bother me so much if he was, for example, more like a Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard carries himself like that, except he doesn't demand that people treat him like that, right? Damian Lillard lets everything he's doing, lets his actions do the talking for him. Donovan Mitchell has this like, I should be considered like LeBron James kind of air about him, and it's like, dude, show us.
That is the Jazz fan and James Peterson speaking right there. That is
Especially now that he's not on the team.
Yeah.
When he was on the team, I was like, yeah, of course he's going to get there. He's going to get there. Now that it's removed, it's like, are you going to get there? I don't know.
I'm still going.
Still a great
hoping,
accomplishment.
I'm still hoping for a Minnesota versus Cleveland finals. Rudy versus Donovan.
That'd be outstanding.
Be fantastic. Give us a lot to talk about. All right, we've got 18 holes to Stonebridge, powered by the Festival of Tees and the Utah Golf Association. We're going to give that away with the trivia question next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. All right, we've got 18 holes to Stonebridge, 877-353-0700. That's how you text us your answer to this very easy trivia question. We talked about it on the show today. The Utah Jazz have extended their head coach, Will Hardy, until which year? 877-353-0700. First correct answer gets 18 holes to Stonebridge, courtesy of the Festival of Tees, the Utah Golf Association, and Mountain America Credit Union. Spence Checketts on the drive is going to be giving away tickets to Stonebridge as well today. Crosstalk coming, brought to you by Burt Brothers. Burt Brothers. Yeah, that duet. There
Figured
you go.
I'd get involved.
All right.
I can harmonize a little.
All right, I like that.
I'll go high next time.
How was your weekend?
It was good. Rained off the golf course yesterday, which was kind of a bummer, but
First
a lot
world
of
problem.
Indeed, I'm okay. I got 5 holes in.
T's and P's.
And, got all 18 in on Saturday, so I'm not going to complain. Spent some time elevated in the mountains, saw a little family. Had a good time, man. Good weekend, and I'm ready to roll. A lot of Game 7s in hockey, 2 crazy Game 7s in hockey, and, just a stonesy win by the Warriors.
Is Spence Checketts a clutch performer?
I'd like to think so.
Like
I'd like to think pressure is a privilege.
Mikko Rantanen, right?
Uh-huh.
What you're talking about. 3 goals and an assist in a third period of a deciding game
against his former
team.
Yeah.
And skating past the bench and just being like,
Yeah. That must have felt so good.
Giving the old hello.
I've been saying this to our audience. I know hockey's new here. There just isn't anything like Game 7, third period, close game. Jets get that goal with 1.3 seconds left, the latest game-tying goal in a Game 7 in the history of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
And then hammered out for 2 overtimes to finally get the win.
Amazing. And this, you don't have to be a fan of fighting per se to tune in and know which fighter's different. You don't have to be a fan of golfing per se to tune in and know that Scotty Scheffler's different. You don't have to be a hockey fan to know that what you're watching is special. If it's the third period of a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals, there's just... I think it's a combination of the pressure that is at hand. And then in basketball, the game is over when the clock strikes 0. In hockey, it's over when the puck is in the back of the net. And it feels so final and so instant. It's incredible theater. So, I do think our local hockey club, Tusks Up. I don't know if you heard the news.
Oh, my God.
I know, man.
I'm so excited.
You're down with the Mammoth.
Yeah. Are you not?
No, I'm not.
You're a UHC guy?
Yeah, keep it classy, keep it clean. But that's the difference between you and I. Keep it classy, keep it clean.
Yes.
You like the pomp and
prone to precociousness
Indeed.
and boyhood wonderment.
Well said.
Yes.
I have nothing left to add.
Yes.
But I think they're going to make the playoffs next year. I really do. And it's going to be so fun to have that environment here in Salt Lake. So
yeah, it's going to be fantastic. And I will say this: if you're still not sold on hockey, all the things that you have come to despise about other professional athletes, absent among hockey players.
Correct.
You don't like the load management thing. You don't like the let's get overly political thing. You don't like any of that stuff. Hockey players are about one thing, and that's playing hockey.
They want to show up and do their job. And, they're, every profession has, certain players that maybe don't fit the mold, but most of them are great community people, love where they live, and they're not pining for their next move, right? So I don't think Bill Armstrong will run into the same challenges as Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge when it comes to roster construction. I really don't. So this is a team that's been rebuilt over the past 4 or 5 years. Clayton Keller named captain of Team USA Hockey over the weekend, so really cool. I think we have 4 hockey players with Team USA for the championships coming up on Friday. So, yeah, it was a fun year one to have them here. Obviously, the Delta Center reconstruction will help out the viewership, the viewing experience. But the Stanley Cup playoffs, NBA playoffs, man, it's been a lot of fun to consume both those over the weekend.
Yeah, and by the way, the NBA playoffs have been absolutely fantastic,
Yeah.
and we are your home of the playoffs here
Yep.
on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. So teams that are trying to win basketball games, you can listen to those games right here.
Yes, indeed. And for the team that isn't trying to win basketball games, they made a really interesting move today, and I know you've been talking about it. I heard you discuss it earlier. I'm more surprised that Will said yes to this. That's a 9-year runway. No coach. I mean, you want to say yes to the job security, right? But throughout the course of the final few weeks of the regular season into the postseason, there were snapshot moments that just kind of made me sit up in my chair and go, okay, so where are we at with the Jazz? The Detroit Pistons have not won a home playoff game since 2008. The Minnesota Timberwolves, for the first time in the history of their franchise, have won playoff series in consecutive seasons. Mm-hmm. The Millers set a culture of consistent competitiveness. Never a championship. We never hung a championship banner. But there is there is a very real chance that we are in the early stages of one of these NBA purgatory long game roster construction rebuild projects that, Sean, we've just never had here. We haven't. It's been 2 and 3 years and boom. You draft D. Will, you sign Booz after John O'Connor gone, boom, okay? They bounce, Hayward, Favors, boom. We've got another era, and then it's Mitchell, it's Gobert. And we'll see what happens 1 week from tonight. Maybe Mr. Flagg is on his way to our market. But if they drop to 3, 4, 5, and it's another decent young player with some promise, they're just not even close, man. I mean, you referenced the NBA playoffs. If you're watching these teams through the prism of where are the Jazz are 4 or 5 pieces away from any of these teams.
Well, and the NHL draft lottery is tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And the Sharks drafted number 1 overall last year. Macklin Celebrini scored 63 points for them.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal rookie campaign. Worst record in the NHL. So even when you get the guy, it's probably going to take some time.
Yeah.
So all things that are food for thought, and Spence Checketts will be talking about them on the drive. That's next. Thanks to everyone who joined us on the show today. Thanks to all of you for listening. That's it for the Sean O'Connell Show. Let's do it again tomorrow on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.